are likely to impact on the architectural character of a building or its historic interest. The Council's Heritage Officer, as well as Historic England, have been consulted on this application. Whilst a low level of less than substantial harm has been identified, this will be outweighed by the public benefit of securing the long-term repair and performance of the Farnham Museum, also known as Wilmer House. Therefore, the recommendation is that, subject to conditions, Regulation 13 listed consent be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Members of the committee now. Do any members of the committee have any technical questions they wish to ask? If not, we'll move to the debate. Do any members wish to start? This is going to be the fastest. Oh, thank you for not disappointing, Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if the officer could just expand a little bit on the statement, the low level of substantial harm. What is that actually? Could you just tell us what it is?
Of course. So a low level of less than substantial harm has been identified due to the scaffolding that needs to be put in place. That's going to be a temporary measure and you will make good afterwards. But like both the Heritage Officer and Historic England identified, it's a low level of substantial harm and they will definitely be outweighed by the long-term benefits of the repairs needed for Farnham Museum.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. The scaffolding has been there for years, actually.
I know there's probably there will be some additional scaffolding.
Additional scaffolding.
But it will be only temporary and it will be repaired afterwards.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. That's very helpful.
Problem.
If no one else, we'll move to the recommendation, which is subject to conditions that WBC Regulation 13 listed building consent be granted. When your panel lights up, please vote. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. We can now move back to the correct order of the agenda. And the next is item number 9, which is WA 2024/01557, land at Centrum Business Park, 35 to 42 East Street in Farnham. This is, excuse me, this is for the erection of 159 dwellings with associated landscaping, access and parking following phased demolition of existing buildings. Now, as members will, and of the committee and members of the public will know, this item was deferred at the September Planning Committee, and I think it would be appropriate to read out the reason. This application is deferred for the following reasons: to enable the developer to consider amendments to the scheme to decrease the height and density of the development, to adhere to policy FNP 14 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and policy DM4 of the Waverley Local Plan 2023, and to consider the impact on daylight and sunlight to existing residents, to adhere to policy DM5 of the Waverley Local Plan 2023. So the committee, rather than reliving the entire debate that was held in September, the committee's focus primarily should be on the deferral notice and the result of the applicant in responding to that deferral notice. But for additional context, the planning officer is providing another presentation for the benefit of any members who weren't present. I think there was only one that's not here this evening, or is here this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Joanne. This is Joanne's first appearance at Waverley's Planning Committee. So welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. As the Chair has mentioned, this application was deferred from the meeting on the 3rd of September for consideration to be given to the decreasing the height and density and to the daylight and sunlight impacts to existing residents. Since the deferral from that meeting, amended plans have been received on the application and they have been subject to further neighbour notification. I'll highlight some of the amendments as we go through some of the slides. The first slide shows the outline of the site edged in red, overlaid on an aerial photograph. The next slide shows an aerial photograph facing in a northerly direction. Slide 4 shows the layout of the proposed development. You can see the blocks are labelled A, B, C, D, E and F, with A, B and C fronting Dogflood Way and E and F fronting East Street, and Block D is centrally located within the site. In relation to the first changes which have been made since the deferral from September, we have the slide showing Block B and the east elevation. The picture on the left shows the superseded plan and the picture on the right shows the new amended plan, and you can see that the two gable features from Block B have been removed. These gable features extended above the ridgeline of the roof of the development, and they have been removed and replaced with dormer windows. These are much smaller in size and they also are restrained to the opening windows or the opening doors to the terrace levels. The next slide shows a slightly altered southeast elevation, again facing Dogflood Way, and perhaps you can see more clearly on the left-hand side how the gable features extended above the ridgeline, and how now on the right-hand side the dormers, they're flat-roofed and they reflect the scale and size and design of the dormers on the rest of that building. The next slide shows Block B in relation to the Dogflood Way frontage. So you can see how now the roofscape at roof level, with the removal of those two gable features, it presents a much more consistent roofscape to Dogflood Way. Moving on to the other changes, I've included the ground floor plan of Block E just to highlight that there have been no changes to the footprint of the building in Block E, but the height of Block E and also Block F have been reduced by 400 millimetres so that they are now 12.2 metres in height. So this is the northwest elevation that faces East Street. The next slide again shows Block F, and again there have been no changes to the positioning or the footprint of Block F, but again the elevation that faces East Street, that has been reduced in height by 400 millimetres and is also 12.2 metres in height. The next slide shows Block E and F out along the street elevation, again facing East Street. This slide has been provided by the applicant and shows the street ratio diagrams and shows the street ratio enclosure, which relates to the relationship between the height of the buildings and the width across the street, showing a street ratio of 1:1. You have Block E on the left-hand side and Block F on the right-hand side, and you can see that the reduced heights are 12.2 on that slide. This is a CGI of Block E. This was in the previous presentation. That's facing East Street. Then we have updated cross sections of the site. The top one is looking from East Street. So you have on the left-hand side the existing East Street properties, and then you have buildings E and F. This diagram has been updated to account for the reduction in the overall AOD heights. And again, the section at the bottom of the slide, that is Block E on the left-hand side, and then Block A fronting Dogflood Way on the right-hand side, with Block E having been reduced in height. The next two slides, these have also been updated since the previous presentation, and these show the phasing of the development and the sequence of the development itself. There are two plans and they are to be read from top left to top right, then bottom left and bottom right. So you have demolition, construction of block A, and then the construction of block B and C as you move around Dogflood Way. And then on the next slide, we have the completion with on the top left, block D in the centre of the site, then block E on the top right-hand picture, and the demolition of the building in the bottom left-hand corner, and finally the construction of block F. I do have other slides of the presentation if members did have any questions, but if I could just move to the issues in relation to the issues that have changed since the deferral. All of the issues are set out in the officer report, including the updates since the deferral. In relation to daylight and sunlight, regarding the reduction in the heights of blocks E and F, the applicant has also submitted a technical response to the objections relating to daylight, sunlight and overshadowing. This is on the website and has also been summarised in section 5 of the report. The technical response states that additional modelling and verification modelling has been undertaken to address the specific concerns in the objection letters. The technical response concludes that the height reductions provide a quantifiable improvement to daylight and sunlight, and that the applicant's original assessment was technically sound. The response states that the scheme is acceptable both with and without the 400mm reduction in height of blocks E and F. The technical response has also assessed the impact on the solar panels in relation to the Lionsgate development and confirms that the impact on generation capacity is negligible. Overall, whilst there are some limited areas where the impacts fall below the BRE guidelines, as these were identified in the original case officer report, this does not automatically render a scheme unacceptable. The BRE guidelines are not mandatory, and in an urban brownfield location, it is accepted that the guidelines may not be met in all cases. These harms need to be balanced against the benefits of the scheme. In relation to the Thames Basin Heath SPA and also the SANG, an updated appropriate assessment has been prepared for the application, and we have consulted with Natural England on this. Natural England hasn't objected to the application on the basis that Farnham Park and or Nations Lane SANG can provide suitable avoidance for the recreational pressure resulting from the scheme. Concerns have been raised regarding the use of Nations Lane SANG in relation to policy FNP 12, but as the application site is within the catchment area of this SANG, and this SANG has recently been accepted at appeal by an inspector as avoidance for Old Park Lane at Farnham development, it is not considered that the use of this SANG would be unacceptable for this development. Since the recent air appropriate assessment was undertaken, Moore Park SANG has also now received planning permission. This provides greater certainty that this SANG can be delivered, and it can also be used as suitable avoidance for this development. Natural England have been further advised that Moore Park SANG has received planning permission, and they have made the following response: that it will be for Waverley Borough Council as competent authority to be satisfied that Moore Park SANG will serve as effective mitigation and prevent adverse effects on the integrity of the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area. Therefore, sufficient SANG capacity exists to avoid the impact from the proposed development. Since the update sheet has been prepared, there has been one further representation received on the application. This has been posted on the website. This letter of objection makes comments that are already summarised in the report, and also makes the following additional comments. The height comparison images provided showing the development and some of the other developments are misleading, as they use the highest buildings in the town centre, and these buildings are some distance from the application site. The heights of buildings A, B and C would exceed the central Farnham benchmarks. A more realistic comparison of blocks E and F would be with Lionsgate and wheelwrights, which are limited to 4 stories and 12 metres. The prevailing 2 to 3 storey neighbourhood is much lower in height than the proposed buildings. In respect of daylight and sunlight, there is next to no analysis of the buildings at 68 to 73 East Street, which would be adversely affected, and additional information fails to address the impacts of these emitted windows. It draws attention to the non-compliance with BRE guidelines and states that these are significant factors. It comments on overlooking and also that councillors should carefully consider the application and the wider impacts. In relation to the comments made, as the officer, I would just highlight one factor in that in relation to the comment about the next to no analysis in relation to 68 to 73 East Street. These buildings are on the northern side of East Street and they're around 40 metres from Block C, and the dwellings that are much closer on the southern side of East Street have been assessed as for daylight and sunlight. The update sheet details an alteration to condition 2 and also an additional condition relating to water efficiency. In summary, the changes made to the scheme represent reductions in bulk at roof level and the overall height of blocks E and F, and these are beneficial alterations in terms of visual amenity and also neighbour amenity. The tilted balance is engaged and the planning balance remains as set out in the report, that the benefits of the scheme, including delivering much needed housing on a suitable, sustainable brownfield site with the environmental and economic benefits, would outweigh the adverse impacts identified in the report. The recommendation is as per the agenda papers and the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. That was very useful. We now move on to the public speaking part of this application, and we have 5 speakers. We have 2, what I will call from the objecting side, 2 from the supporting, and the ward councillor George Hess, who's sitting at the back. The first person, member of the public, to speak is Mr. Barry Saunders. You have access to your microphone, Barry?
Do I push the yellow button?
Switch it on for you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My fellow residents and I do not object lightly and are fully engaged with our surveyor to assist in the speech. We accept that redevelopment of brownfield sites is often necessary. However, we're opposing the current scheme because of the severe and unjustified harm it would cause to daylight, sunlight and residential amenity in our homes and gardens. This harm isn't just limited to daylight and sunlight, but also the visual impact of the development and the material harm to our actual experience, sense of enclosure, our loss of privacy and our outlook. The accepted benchmark for assessing the daylight and sunlight is the BRE guidance. Our surveyor identified several issues with the impact classification system in the report, among others. Turning first to daylight, using the vertical sky component test, which measures the amount of daylight reaching the windows, the applicant's own figures show that 35 of 123 neighbouring windows failed the BRE criteria. That's 28%. In some cases, the loss of daylight is up to 38%, almost double the level generally accepted as acceptable. These failures are concentrated at Lionsgate and the East Street properties closest to Block C, E and F, where the neighbours and residents will experience the greatest harm. Crucially, in several flats, all habitable room windows are affected. For example, at flat 4 in Lionsgate, every main window serving the living and kitchen spaces breaches the BRE test. Our surveyor disagrees that this loss can be classified as minor. This is misleading. With all windows to a flat are affected, the BRE guidance indicates the impact should be treated as moderate or even major. Daylight distribution within rooms is even more concerning. The applicant's figures show reduction of daylight within rooms up to 76%. That's not marginal. Rooms will become noticeably darker with large parts of living spaces and other habitable rooms left without adequate levels of natural daylight. Sunlight impacts are also significant. While some windows technically retain 25% annual sunlight, winter sunlight losses are extreme, and in one example, winter sunlight is reduced by over 80%. Winter sunlight is particularly important given its scarcity, and losses go far beyond the BRE thresholds, with the inevitable significant consequential effects on health and well-being. The garden impact is also severe, with 3 of the 5 gardens assessed failing BRE test, in reality 7 out of 9, with a number losing over half existing sunlight. The 40 centimetre height reduction to certain blocks doesn't really address the underlying harm and makes no material difference to the loss of light to the lower floors of our properties. Importantly, the above impacts are not minor or technical issues. They represent a fundamental change in how these homes and gardens can be used and enjoyed. The scale of the development combined with its proximity to existing properties results in an overbearing form of development that fails to respect its neighbours. We understand the BRE is designed to be interpreted flexibly. However, our consultant does not consider in this instance that suitable justifications have been demonstrated relative to the level of harm. This is not a development site in a dense city centre. It's a suburban area where the changes cannot be, the harms cannot be justified by context, and where there are expectations of good levels of daylight and sunlight. The most recent submissions do not negate, in our consultants' view, the final conclusions drawn in their report, and their firm view is that this proposal will result in clear and significant lasting harm to the living conditions of existing residents. We therefore respectfully ask the committee to give substantial weight to the real and tangible harm identified and to refuse the application in its current form. Thank you, Chair.
Time to perfection. Our next speaker is a Mr. Blackmore. You two have 4 minutes from when you start.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair, committee members and councillors. I'd like to give some context to my continued objection to the proposed development. As a long-term resident and owner at 71 East Street, which is direct opposite Block C to the north, I've been there since 2006, and whilst acknowledging this location has a number of limitations, being a mid-terrace affected by traffic, significant noise and environmental pollution, limited pavement buffer at barely 1 metre to the road, double yellow lines outside and severe parking limitations. However, this is mitigated for me by having daily dawn to dusk full sun to front of house, which is the only direct light source for both mine and my neighbours' properties. This proposal as is will negate that. It will reduce and remove direct winter sun experience for the main living rooms and bedrooms on all East Street properties when it is most needed. It will further add overlooking, whether at distance or in close proximity, for a number of properties, significantly so for the terrace at 43 to 51, being enclosed also by 4+ stories on 2 sides, and with more than 2 additional stories effectively added across mine and my neighbours' viewpoints. For myself, loss of direct winter sun adversely affects disproportionately. It has not been adequately assessed or covered in other submissions in this respect, as covered by Mr. Saunders. In my case, it misses 3 windows that should have been assessed, which were not. If this were keeping to the original brief of around 120 properties on site, I suspect I would not be here today. But the increase to 159 and resultant change from maximum 4-storey buildings to 5- and 6-storey make it inevitable that I and neighbours will be impacted adversely. The pre-existing local neighbourhood properties are predominantly 2- and 3-storey buildings of age, circa 1860s, not 5-storey. As reference for Brightwells, or indeed comparing recent developments or close proximity in either Lionsgate or Wheelwrights at 4-storey. Comparing height precedents in Brightwells and Woolmeads as yet unbuilt and which may never be, both of which are some 165 metres away. Comparing lowest height buildings E and F at 12.2 metres with Brightwells and Woolmead up to 17 metres is incredibly misleading, as blocks A, B and C are at or above the current tallest Farnham buildings reference with a worst case height of 19.55 metres. So this is clearly out of scale, even if it were in the town centre, which it is not. I read on the balance judgments expressed elsewhere, but this has limited, if any, acknowledgement of actual negative impacts, with both light restrictions and overlooking being introduced along all of the East Street properties, so the balance is detrimentally skewed for all. I see no upside to this development, in fact only negative impacts on an already challenged site. I really hope you reflect on these points and direct this to a better scheme rather than what is proposed. Please be clear, if approved as is, you make it likely that I and other neighbours will be benefiting from legal right of light will end up in the courts, much as I'd prefer not to. I would ask the applicant to keep to the original brief, scale this back accordingly, minimising the adverse impacts and develop something a whole lot more workable and less downside for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackmore. We now have a speaker on behalf of the applicant, Mr. David Lewis. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members. I'm speaking today on behalf of the landowner as the developer. I would like to be clear about our commitment to Farnham. We are local landowners and developers working with local architects and have already delivered a number of commercial and residential schemes in the town. We live and work in Farnham, and importantly, we have a long-term interest in Farnham's future. This proposal is not speculative. It is the culmination of 5 years of investment, assessment, design work and consultation. From the outset, we have worked closely with officers and consultees to bring forward a scheme that makes efficient use of the land, is policy compliant and is of high quality. The application was assessed by the Council's planning and design team, Surrey Highways, the design review panel and a wide range of technical specialists and local stakeholders, resulting in recommendation for approval. The scheme was deferred by members in the September committee. The purpose of that deferral was to allow for further consideration of height, density and neighbour amenity. As a result, the scheme has been further refined and more information and clarification to address concerns provided. Building heights have been reduced, roof forms simplified and massing refined where it has the greatest townscape and amenity relevance. In particular, buildings opposite the newly constructed Lionsgate, where most concerns have been raised, now sit at a reduced height. While modest reductions, these blocks are now almost identical in height to Lionsgate, lower than the coach house opposite, and materially lower by several metres than the Brightwells building further along East Street. These changes reinforce compliance with policy DM4, ensuring a high-quality design that makes the most efficient use of the land it sits on and responds positively to its surroundings. It is also important to note that officers confirmed the proposal was acceptable in planning terms before these amendments were made. The revisions do not alter the overall planning balance. They strengthen an already policy-compliant scheme while maintaining its viability and deliverability. As requested, neighbour amenity has again been carefully and comprehensively considered. Daylight, sunlight, overshadowing and privacy have been independently assessed by 2 specialists. The Council's own assessor had already confirmed the scheme's acceptability prior to the above changes, thus further enhancing acceptability to policy DM5. Furthermore, matters raised by public consultees have been comprehensively addressed recently by a full technical response. On density, this is an allocated site where flatted development at this scale is anticipated. While the scheme delivers 159 homes, officers have concluded that this modest uplift over the indicative figure and allocated figure of 150 is justified by the site's sustainable location, efficient use of land and its design-led approach. Importantly, the proposed density is lower than that of the already consented coach house scheme directly opposite, and retaining this level is necessary to ensure the scheme remains viable and capable of being delivered. Finally, the scheme will deliver much needed housing in a highly sustainable town centre location at a time when the council has very limited housing land supply. It will generate very significant contributions towards local infrastructure, greatly improve the public realm, enhance connectivity and deliver meaningful biodiversity gains with improved landscaping. Delivering houses in these locations is paramount. We have to reduce the pressure to develop in villages and the wider countryside. Chair and members, we do hope that after these changes and clarifications that you feel we have listened, responded constructively and brought forward a well-designed, policy-compliant scheme that delivers clear public benefits. For those reasons, I respectfully ask you to support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We now have a Mr. Max Lyons, who has also 4 minutes.
Good evening. As you heard, my name is Max Lyons and I am chairman of the architects for this application. I live in the town centre in the only Grade 1 house in Farnham, which I've restored. I'm the past chairman of the Farnham Society. I designed the Lion and Lamb in total and many other Farnham buildings. I very strongly defend Farnham. But this site is very different from Castle Street or the Borough. It is bordered by an industrial estate, a modern supermarket, a 6-storey multi-storey car park and a sports centre. The South East Design Review Panel were happy with the scale, height and massing of these proposals. The application was recommended for approval by the officers. The committee has asked for alterations to the scale. We have reduced the height of the 2 proposed buildings in East Street by nearly 2 feet, as shown. These are 3-storey buildings with roof dormers, and they are lower than the building under construction opposite. I have seen reports that our proposals were hard on the back of the footpath. We have shown the distance from the curb to the front wall of these 2 buildings, which varies between 10 and 16 feet for the pavements and front gardens. This is wider than the previous buildings on the site. In comparison, outside the former Chinese restaurant, the distance from the curb to the front wall of the buildings is about 3 feet. You have seen a comparison of our buildings E and F on East Street with Brightwell's East Street building, and it shows that our buildings E and F are 10 feet lower than the Brightwell's building. We have reduced the apparent scale of building B by removing the gables in the roof, which is now a 5-storey building with dormer windows in the roof. None of the proposed buildings are higher than the highest building in Brightwell. We need to find town centre sites for more residential, or we will lose more appeals on greenfields around the town. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. We now move to the ward councillor, who is Councillor George Hess. George, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, members of the public. Hope you can hear me. Since this application was deferred, the Centrum scheme has had minimal changes made, a height reduction of just 400 millimetres to some blocks and the replacement of a glazed gable with dormers. So the basis for deferment, being height, density and neighbour amenity, have not been fully addressed. It is accepted that Centrum is an allocated site in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and will be developed eventually. But the question for me is, what will be built there? Will it comply with our planning policies? Will it fit in, enhance and beautify the area? Will it be a good neighbour to the residents who currently live nearby and future residents? Or will Centrum be just a series of huge apartment buildings that dominate the important eastern entrance to the town, casting its shadow over its neighbours? It has been demonstrated previously that there are significant breaches of Waverley Local Plan and Farnham Neighbourhood Plan policies. There are main issues, as I see it, are severe overlooking, which still remain, no affordable housing, contrary to policy AHN1, 30% minimum should be provided, high density more appropriate to cities and large urbanised towns rather than a small historic town like Farnham, 6 stories, contrary to policy FNP 14J in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, which calls for 4 stories. And given that 122 flats would have no parking and many residents may use bikes, the lack of provision for oversized bikes such as cargo, trailer and tandem is contrary to Waverley Borough Council's 2023 guidance for new developments. And the provision for waste disposal is inadequate and would cause problems for residents in the future and the waste contractors if this scheme is ever built. The tiny terrace cottages currently undergoing refurbishment on the south side of East Street will be completely dominated and towered over by Block C, just a few yards away to the south, severely blocking their natural light. Residents living on the north side and Lionsgate would also be badly impacted by the shadowing by Block C and would be overlooked. Further, along East Street, the Wheelwright site under construction would suffer overshadowing for future residents by Centrum's Block F and be a permanent issue they would have to live with. I asked the committee who amongst us would want to live in the shadow of a towering apartment block. I would guess not many. The future of the East End of Farnham is in your hands this evening. A future of intensive development or a more considered and careful approach. I'd also add that the approval of this policy-breaking development will be seen by the community at large as further erosion of planning policies. We may as well tear up local and neighbourhood plans if relevant policies are to be nullified. And what if the committee consider refusing the application tonight? You may think it could go to appeal, and maybe it would. And who knows, it might be refused there. So I ask you to take the chance and give the residents of East Street the reassurance that someone is looking out for them. It's likely Centrum will be developed at some point in time. So like I said, it's what is built is the question. This overdevelopment is wrong on many counts. And if it's wrong, we should reject it and wait for a more sympathetic and appropriate scheme to come forward. So colleagues, I ask you this evening to please refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hess. I'll come back to you to sum up briefly after we. Oh, it's off now. Once we've had a discussion. So, members, before we get into any proper debate or discussion, does anybody have any technical questions that they would like to ask? Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions I'd like to ask. The first one is that, as has been explained to us, the committee last time decided to defer the application. If the committee was to decide, and I'm not trying to predetermine anything here, what the committee will say, if they were to decide they weren't satisfied with what the developer has done and they wish to defer the application again, would that leave the council open to an appeal on non-determination? That's my first question.
Let's ask the head of planning.
So yes, you would open yourself up to the applicant appealing against non-determination. I think also you probably open yourself up to questions around reasonable behaviours in terms of you deferred it for something, and that has been addressed by the applicant in terms of the deferral in a way that still makes the scheme viable, and that it's come back to you. So if, for example, you were now to defer it because you wanted a building with no windows, just as an extreme example, then that would be seen to be unreasonable behaviour.
I think that's quite clear. I think we have to decide this evening one way or another.
I have a second question, Tim, if I may. At the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the lack of affordable housing or provisional for and contribution towards affordable housing. And I think the assistant director, get the title right, the chief planning officer, let's say, advised us that at that meeting that there was a possibility of introducing a condition, I think it was said, that could be reviewed after the scheme was being developed at some stage. If affordable housing should have been provided, it could then be determined that it should be. And maybe not explaining this quite right, but could you just update us on that? Is that now part of the what we're being asked to consider? That if we approve this application, is there a possibility of affordable housing coming forward at a later stage?
So, members, I think what we're referring to is a clause in the legal agreement that would allow a reassessment of the viability at a later stage of the scheme. Officer's advice is that doing so would be contrary to the guidance in the PPG and contrary to the approach inspectors normally take on such clawbacks. But nevertheless, members, if it was you were of the view that clawback clause should be included in the 106, then it is entirely within your gift to decide to do that in your decisions tonight.
Well, I think the answer there, Councillor MacLeod, is keep that one in your back pocket for later.
Okay.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, just to clarify points. Number one is the two objection speeches we've heard both relate to, well, my interpretation is right to light. Can the officer indicate to us how, and I want to put this because I think it's quite important, can the officer relate to how harsh the policy has been applied? In other words, how this, you know, clearly the building is going to remove some of the existing light, and i.e. sunlight, but can you give us any indication at all as to how harsh it's been applied against policy? Does that make sense?
So just in terms of the impact of a proposal on the amenities of another property in terms of loss of light, overshadowing, etc., is an assessment. So it isn't, there isn't a policy that says this can't happen, and the acceptability is going to differ from differing sites. So this is an allocated site, it's in the town centre, so there is a presumption in favour of development on this site. Obviously the road is only as wide as the road is, so the separation distances, etc., are going to be, reflective of the character of the area. So we've assessed the impact, and we do not feel it to be so harmful as to justify the proposal being refused. And obviously, members, for you to assess whether or not you agree with that, assessment. There is impact, but it isn't so harmful as to make the scheme unacceptable.
I think, if I can jump in there, the reason we have planning committees is for members to judge whether any potential harm outweighs the benefit, and vice versa.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, I'll move to my second question. It's probably relevant at this point. Can I just take you back to the Sang situation? And I appreciate that this is something which is, so to speak, back-end loaded. This decision could be made much longer, much later in the process. But I would be saying most definitely on behalf of Farnham that if Moore Park, which it is going to be available, I would be very strongly in favour of that, because it would seem to me on this particular development, we want to reduce the need for cars. There is restricted parking anyway, and we know there are existing issues in Farnham. So we want to reduce the use of cars, and Moore Park is walkable from that location, if you're reasonably fit and healthy. So could I just have some clarification as to whether there will be weighted for Moore Park rather than Nations Wood? Thank you.
So legally, both those Sangs would provide the required mitigation to make this development acceptable, i.e. it provides appropriate alternative recreational green space within the distance that it needs to be located to make it acceptable mitigation. So we couldn't discriminate between one or the other. Obviously, Moore Park would be, we can't discriminate, but Moore Park would be the more preferable of the two options, given that it is not car dependent. But if the applicant came forward with the other Sang as part of their mitigation package, then we couldn't not accept that.
So just to clarify, it isn't a gift of the applicant to suggest the relevant Sang site.
That's absolutely correct. And during the life of this proposal, if something else came into the mix, then that could also be proposed by the applicant and could be acceptable.
Councillor Gale, you're hiding behind a tree officer.
Well, where better to be? On the subject of the Sang, so we have two Sang options. And one is, as councillor White says, it is actually just about walking distance if you're fit and able. The other is car dependent. And we know that this development only has 37 parking spaces. So if they opted for that SANG, which is car dependent, are we really shouldn't be accepting that?
So members, SANG has to be within 5 kilometres of development, and we've got lots of SANGs across the wider area that are used by developments, and people are driving to them by car. So we can't not accept it. The preference is going to be something that's walkable or cyclable, but we could not rule out a SANG that was within 5 kilometres of a development.
Can I just come back on that? Surely we're looking at a development without parking. So how are people going to access the SANG? If it's got to be drivable, there won't be cars.
Public transport, cycling or walking.
Councillor Steiger.
I notice the aforementioned tree officer doesn't support this and recommends recommendations. I just wanted to see what the specific recommendations were about the trees, because I seem to recall a number of trees were going to be cut down, and I just wanted to see what the provision there was. Thank you.
So, sorry, I think I should clarify that there are 37 parking spaces on this development, just so we're all clear that it isn't a parking-free development. Also, I think it's worth, members reflecting on the fact that SANGs are predominantly there for people who are wanting to walk their dogs and would otherwise go to the SBA. So again, you need to reflect on the type of accommodation and the dog ownership as well. But there are 37 parking spaces, just so the committee are clear that this isn't a parking-free development.
Thank you. In relation to the tree aspects, this was covered in the original case officer report. That said there are no trees located within the site itself, but 19 trees and 2 tree groups are located directly adjacent to the site boundary, which is on land owned by the Highway Authority, and they were included in the tree survey. 10 of the trees are proposed to be removed along the eastern frontage, but the County Highway Authority has confirmed that this area is safeguarded for future improvements for pedestrians and cyclists on the west side of Dogflood Way for a continuous connection between the site and East Street. And the landscaping plan and the planting plans provide tree planting across the site, which includes the replacement of those off-site trees to the south and east with approximately 13 trees. And the tree planting would occur in the public spaces between the 6 buildings on the site. On that basis, the officers considered and concluded that they considered the proposal would provide adequate landscaping and tree planting in the context of the existing site constraints to ensure a satisfactory outcome in creating an attractive public realm. If those trees are on highway land, then the Highway Authority could remove them at any point anyway. And if that land is already safeguarded for future improvements, they could make that decision themselves. Thank you.
Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the sake of being a little pedantic, just going back to the SANG issue, you mentioned that the had to be within 5 kilometres. Just having checked it on my phone, it's 7.1 kilometres. If that is, I know you're not going to take my word for it, but if that is proven to be the case, would that actually mean that Nations would not be viable? Thank you.
Okay. We've identified Nature's Wood as a potential appropriate SANG. If it then came forward that something had changed or we didn't think it met that criteria, then obviously we wouldn't be in a position to be able to discharge the planning condition, and they would have to look at other alternatives that may be available at the time they chose to discharge that condition.
So I think that's a confirmation that it will be checked. I don't see any other hands. So I think it's time that we move to the recommendation. Sorry. Councillor Munro.
I wanted to speak in the debate, which I wasn't aware had started. I thought these were just points of clarity. Can I?
My apologies.
That's all right. Can I speak, Chairman? Thank you very much. I should say that I'm a new member of this particular planning committee, and so I wasn't involved at all in the debate and decision in September, coming to it recently. I know the area well for well over 30 years. I've seen it come and go, and so I think I have a pretty good knowledge of that. It's not town centre, in my view, nor is it suburbs. It's intermediate, and I think that should have a considerable weight in our deliberations. It worries me, this development. First of all, lighting. I won't go into that. That's been covered very well by residents, except I do think they have a point. I think the access has not really been covered comprehensively enough in the report, although it does make a reference to it, of course. It's not just waste trucks. There are 159 flats. Most of them are more than one bedroom, and there's going to be a lot of people there. They will require delivery vans. I can see Amazon Prime being there all hours of the day and night. They will require ambulances. There will be a lot of dropping off for people who are not as mobile as the rest, and so on and so forth. And the road outside, which I can't see any fundamental changes to the traffic in East Street and Dogflood Way, is, as we all know, a very busy road indeed, and that will continue. So I don't think the access arrangements have quite been thought through. But my third reservation is it's just too much of it. As it's not a town centre site, we all accept, I think, that there will be development there. There will be substantial development, and quite rightly so. It is over the top, it's too high, it's too crowded, and it's too overbearing. So I'm very uneasy about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members of the public. If there's nobody else in the debate, sorry, Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. We discussed this at length in the previous meeting. I think there is a fundamental problem we face with this application and others right across Waverley. We have an acute shortage of housing. We also have a great shortage of land suitable for housing. The only way we will be able to reconcile these conflicting demands, I think, is by accepting that we need densification, and that means we need to be building up. My sense at the previous meeting was that while there were reservations, we were inclined to support it, but we wanted the developers to come back with some amendments that they have done. Having previously engaged in extensive consultation, as we have heard, I think we really do need to now go ahead and approve this application. Thank you.
Councillor Gale.
I thank the developer for actually having another look at it, but to be honest, I don't think it's really addressed the things that we asked it to be deferred for. It is still very high, it's still very dense, and the light and the sunlight to the neighbouring properties hasn't really been helped at all. I'll find it very difficult to approve this still, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Gale. Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I have to disagree with those last comments. We asked this to be, we deferred it so that we could look again at the height, or the developer could look again at the height and amend, and for the impact on light to be reassessed. We know that the light has been reassessed, and we know that the height has been decreased. We know this is an allocated site. It is a brown belt site. We know the tilted balance is engaged. I have to agree with Councillor Weldon. This should be approved tonight.
Councillor Steiger.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that I'm disappointed with the 4 centimetre reduction. It is a reduction, but for blocks E and F on the 12.2 metres, 400 millimetres is slightly less than I'd hoped for. So I'm still very disappointed. Thank you.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to agree with Councillor Steiger. I'm a little bit disappointed as well. The developer has made an effort to reduce the height, and they have done, but they haven't addressed the density issue actually at all. The density is still exactly as it was before. But I'm very, very conflicted in how to vote on this development actually now. There is some positive to the development. This was discussed last time. It does provide some additional dwellings towards the need in Farnham, and the housing numbers that are needed to satisfy the government in terms of the targets they've given us. So that's a definite positive. It's a well-designed site in the sense that they have actually managed to fit these buildings into this rather constrained site, and they still look, the buildings themselves look quite nice to me actually. They're well-designed, pleasant-looking buildings, but they're still actually too big because the developer has no choice but to make them big to fit the required number into the size of the site. So I'm extremely conflicted about how to vote on this. I'll just leave it there, and the committee is obviously very conflicted as well. So I'd like to hear more people's opinions before I finally decide how to vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I would really like to see this site built out, given that it's designated and that as Waverley Borough Council, we need more houses. I second what others have said about it coming back after being deferred and looking at the bulk of the roof and the density. I also don't want to see houses being built on Greenbelt, and I don't want to see the expansion of our villages with mass housing, and I agree that houses do have to go up. I just want to second what Councillor Gale has said, that I just don't think this is enough. I think that there should be houses here. I would just like to see a reduction of even just of the bulk of the roof just a little bit more. The diagrams just don't really show too much of a change, and I don't think it's significant enough. But as I said, I would like to see houses here. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I was present at Farnham Town Council when the development team came to speak to us, and they were very open, they're very honest, very straightforward. I have to say, this reminds me of being on the jury service, because you don't know what, you don't know the extent of the crime and previous crimes that have taken place. That's the only relevance to this. What I'm really saying is that with construction hats on and development hats on, we know that there is a figure which makes the site viable. And this is the problem we've got. I would be in agreement as well that the densification is high, and it's unfortunate it's got to be like that, but there are a lot of pressures that are causing that to happen. And I agree with Councillor Weldon's view on this. Where one is conflicted really is that, yes, we would like that site to be developed. I mean, it's not particularly pretty what's there at the moment. It's very functional, and I think most agreed, and those in Farnham, that it would be a significant improvement to the site to have it to have it developed. But the height is a problem, and one almost wants to say, could we ask, is it viable to do something else? But I realise that's in front of us. We've either got to accept this or reject it. And if we reject it, the developer is quite at liberty to go to appeal. And in the current climate, I think we'd be fighting hard to win that case. That's where I feel from experience, from where we are today. So I will be voting for it on the basis that we need to get on and move forward on this. Thank you.
No other speakers, so I'm going to move to Councillor Hess to say a few words in summing up now that he's heard what members have had to say.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three things I'd like to cover. Just as a matter of fact and a little bit of fun, regarding the accessibility to Nations Wood Sang, it's just under 5 kilometres as the crow flies. I don't know whether any of you get around by crow. I don't. I tend to drive. It's a lot further by road. To get to it by public transport, you'd have to walk to the borough, get a bus to Farnborough, catch another to Church Crookham, and walk 15 to 20 minutes to the Sang. Your dog would be well walked before he even got to the Sang, or it. This is not readily accessible and connected to the development it serves, and does not include sustainable modes of transport. So I suggest we kill this idea off once and for all. That's the Nations Wood Sang. Now, it's been claimed tonight that the scheme complies with policies, for example, policy DM5. Well, a little extract from that policy, and it's a Waverley Borough Council planning policy, which we should respect. Development must avoid harming the well-being and amenity of future and existing occupants, which I covered earlier, if you remember. Occupants of nearby land, buildings and residences by way of overlooking loss of daylight or sunlight, overbearing mass or appearance that negatively affect the surroundings. Development should be refused or conditioned unless they can demonstrate avoidance of adverse impact on privacy. That's a policy. You want to ignore it? Tear up the policy book. So I say this scheme does not comply with this policy and a number of other local plan and Farnham neighbourhood plan policies. And colleagues, it really should be refused. I'm sorry, if you thought that it should be, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Now, another little aspect just referred to, great housing demand. Yes, that's from central government, who doubled Waverley's housing target. Now ask yourselves, why has Coxbridge Farm development of 320 properties been closed down? The reality is lack of demand. Flats in Brightwell, still for sale. There's time to come back with a better scheme. If it's wrong, it's wrong. We don't want a wrong scheme permanently blighting Farnham. So honestly, if you thought you might go for accepting this and approving it, I suggest you have a quick rethink and reconsider that, because this will have a permanent mark on Farnham, permanent, for your lifetime and your children's. And also for other people in other parts of the borough, Hazelmere, Cranley, Godalming, if you're on the committee tonight, it might be your turn next, a big overdevelopment, and that should also be resisted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hess. Before we move to the vote, I'm going to turn to our Head of Planning, who's going to give us some words of wisdom, I think.
Or just some words. So members, just a couple of things, just to clarify on the Sang point, it is 5 kilometres. Unfortunately, it is as the crow flies. So this complies with the habitats regs. It's acceptable mitigation, but ultimately, members, you're not being asked to decide tonight which Sang should provide the mitigation. There are 3 alternatives, all of which, or a combination of the 3, would provide acceptable mitigation, and that will be dealt with in effect by a condition should planning permission be granted. Members, I also do want to direct you back to the policy in the neighbourhood plan that allocates this site, and just remind members that the policy itself talks about this being a site with a gross area of 0.7 hectares, approximate density of 215 dwellings per hectare, and approximate capacity of 150 dwellings. So members, you do need to be mindful that that is an allocation policy in a neighbourhood plan, and therefore is material to your decision making this evening. Note that the plan does talk about this being 4-storey, but there's obviously no scale and massing drawings that equates to 4-storey and 150 dwellings. And obviously we have national space standards for the size of dwellings to make sure that what is permitted is seen as good livable accommodation. So members, just in your thinking about what decision you're going to make this evening on this, I think you need to just be mindful of those 2 facts.
So as the members are being mindful, I'll read out the recommendation that delegated authority be given to the Assistant Director of Planning to complete a Section 106 legal agreement and subject to conditions, permission be granted. So we will now move to the vote. If you can use the console in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. We have 5 in favour and 6 against. Therefore, the application is refused.
No, the motion falls. We then need a...
Apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, as our Head of Planning said, we now need somebody to come forward with a motion for refusal, which hopefully will follow policy. Yeah, whatever motion the committee comes up with has to be seconded, and it has to illustrate using policy the harm that this application would create. Councillor Steiger.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, just as a starting point, I mean, the reason I've voted against it was just on the text of the deferment. I just felt that the deferment hadn't been fully addressed and therefore it stands. So I'm quite happy to start off with the deferment text as the basis of why it's been refused. Thank you.
So, members, to have a reason for refusal, you need to identify planning harm. So I think this evening we've heard some of the members talking about overdevelopment, which in itself isn't planning harm, but that overdevelopment causing potentially a unacceptable relationship due to the scale of the development, which also would result in potentially an overbearing effect on adjoining residents, an increased sense of enclosure, which would be contrary to some of your policies within your local plan, DM1, DM5, and some of the LP policies, LP2, and the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan Policy 1. So, members, I think that is possibly what I've heard coming out of the debate this evening, if that's helpful. Obviously, members, if you are also looking to refuse, you would need a second reason for refusal relating to the lack of a Section 106. That's a bit of a hypothetical one because obviously there isn't a 106 because you haven't resolved to grant, but nevertheless, in a refusal, you need to actually identify that there's a lack of a 106 and therefore a lack of the things that would be secured in the 106. So that would be potentially a second reason for refusal.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Munro.
I was going to say all that, only much less elegantly and with much less knowledge. The two issues are surely overbearing, which is what has been mentioned, and also has a detrimental effect on neighbourhood neighbours' amenities. Both which aspects are mentioned in our planning documents as against policy. You gave the numbers there. So is that enough for you, Chairman, as to propose a refusal on those two grounds?
So are you going to second Councillor Steiger, or is Councillor Steiger going to second you?
We weren't talking about the same things.
Councillor Steiger, would you like to second Councillor Munro?
I would like to second Councillor Munro.
So members, if I just then read back the reasons for refusal that you are going to be voting on. The proposed development would result by reasons of the scale and relationship with existing neighbouring dwellings would result in a form of development that would be overbearing and lead to an increased sense of enclosure, harmful to the residential amenities of existing neighbouring properties, contrary to policy DM1 and DM5 of LPP2 and policies FNP1 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. The second reason for refusal is in the absence of a Section 106 agreement to secure the provisions of healthcare contributions, highway infrastructure, mitigation and contributions and suitable management arrangements for property and public realm. The proposal fails to mitigate the impact of the development and ensure that the development is provided with the necessary infrastructure to create a sustainable community and therefore would be contrary to policies IDC 1 and ST1 of the local plan and policies FNP 32 of the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Claire. I think we've got a handful of policies there, so I think we can rely on once we've taken a vote, and depending on the result of that vote, I'm sure we can rely on the head of planning to articulate that in writing. So we now move to another vote, and that is the vote the motion proposed by Councillor Munro and seconded by Councillor Steiger. Please vote on the panel.
Thank you, Chair. That is 6 in favour, 3 abstaining and 2 against.
Thank you, Kim. That means the motion to refuse is carried. We'll be moving to the next item shortly, and I think it's probably advisable just to take a short break while we rearrange the furniture. Thank you, members of the public and members of the committee. We are going to resume very shortly, so if everyone can take their seats. Thank you. We now move to item 10 in the agenda, WA 2025-01716, land west of Tara's Yard, the Reeds Road, Frensham. This is for the change of use of land from agricultural to mixed use agriculture and education, and the erection of a building for educational use with solar panels, erection of bin and cycle store, creation of car park and track with associated landscape, and the relocation of an existing field shelter. The planning case officer is Russell Brown, and I'll move over to you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So, as the Chair outlined, this is an application for the change of use of land west of Tara's Yard from agricultural to a mixed use of agricultural and education for a charity offering supervised activities such as animal care, gardening, carpentry, cookery, nature-based craft activities and beekeeping for young people who are unable to cope in a school-type environment. To facilitate this, a single-storey building is proposed along with an access track, parking area, bin stores, cycle racks. There's also landscaping in the form of new trees and a hedgerow to the south of the car park. The proposal would also involve the relocation of existing field shelter on the site to land within the landowner's ownership, which is to the north of the proposed building. So just moving on to the site location, it's on the north side of the Reeds Road, which links Tilford with Millbridge. It is a 10-minute drive from the existing site for charities who are called Change of Scene, who you can see to the north east of the map. In terms of constraints of the site, it's within the Surrey Hills National Landscape and also the Greenbelt, and is adjacent to ancient replanted woodlands, which you can see on the map as Birtley's Copse. The site is also categorised as Grade 3 agricultural land, which is defined as land with moderate limitations that affect the choice of crops to be grown, timing and type of cultivation, harvesting, or the level of yield. Moving on to some photos of the site. So they show the enclosed nature of the site with mature vegetation to the north, east and west, as well as the non-permanent timber shelter and existing gated access onto the Reeds Road. So this is a site layout which shows displayed access onto Reeds Road and vehicle track with parking place leading to the car park, which would serve as car parking for the staff and the dropping off collection area for the attendees. Ramped access is then proposed into the building, which has been designed to maximise its accessibility for a range of users. Move on to the floor plan, which I've annotated for clarity. So it's going to accommodate a cabin, a kitchen, a sensory room, a craft and nature space, an office, a toilet and a plant and utility room. There would also be some outdoor space, some of which is sheltered underneath the building, but most of it is open to the elements. The roof would feature solar panels. As to the external appearance of the building, single story, you've got part flat, part pitch roof. The materials are timber cladding for the external walls and the ramp, and the building would also feature aluminium clad timber windows and doors, timber shutters, a metal roof, and steel gutter and downpipes. It is recommended that material samples are conditioned. Just moving on to the wider site. So previous applications that have been refused in the past on the site included the whole blue line within the red line. This is a different scale of application in terms of the size of the application site, just limited to the area marked in red. The fields that would be released to the
charity change of scene for 25 years would be located outside the red line, but leasing is a separate matter to planning, and these would be used for the grazing of for charities livestock. Some attendees may assist with feeding of the animals or carrying out simple husbandry tasks, all of which are agricultural in nature. So in terms of the recommendation, it is for approval. The proposal is considered to help meet an unmet need for the education and health of disadvantaged children and young people. It also creates 2 additional full-time equivalent jobs and would enable an established and well-supported charity to continue to operate in the borough. Although not in a particularly sustainable location in terms of accessibility to public transport with no bus stops within safe walking distance, the choice of site has been robustly justified to officers. The proposed building landscaping considered to be well designed. There are also considered to be environmental benefits of a proposal in respect of providing more than the statutory amount of being biodiversity net gain. There are no concerns regarding neighbouring amenity, visual amenity, landscape character, trees and landscaping, transport and highways, climate change and sustainability, or flooding and drainage that cannot be suitably addressed by a condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers. Can I just check, Councillor Munro, if you're going to speak on this?
I'd like to speak as the local ward member, please, Chairman. Thank you.
I'll add you to the list then. Thank you. The first speaker, I believe, is a new speaker just been added to the list, Mr. Glenn Plant.
You can come to the
Yeah.
front, please.
This is a bit of a surprise. I chair an organisation called.
What?
The large button in the middle.
I'm technically
I know it's a bit of a surprise, but you are a willing volunteer?
I am indeed. I'm actually a proxy for a local resident who did object. Who doesn't feel able to speak.
Okay, you have 4 minutes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so cobbling this together on the spot. The 48 locals who promote by consensus sustainable and oppose unsustainable development through the Residents Association, the East Midlands Sustainable Development Association, have tried to help change of scene, find a sustainable future home. The site as described is not it, not least because it's too wet. EMSDA has done so by being wary of the applicant, given a long series of inappropriate planning applications for this land. The last one indeed inconsistent with the charitable purpose claimed here. After a brief show of transparency in September, they've made attempts to separate EMSDA members from the consensus by which it operates. The site is, I'm afraid, misdescribed by the officer. All the concerned local lawyers, including planning experts, held a meeting and agreed back in September that the application should apply to the entire 10 acres leased to change of scene, because the change of use applies to all 10 acres. We don't have a copy of the lease, but we have a fair idea of the land involved, which this map is not much use to you because I should have come with an A3, but wasn't expecting to speak. But it also shows the presence of an intermittent waterway which has been disregarded by the officer, which is why we say that the site is too wet. And we don't understand why another site under the control of the applicants could not have been furnished, including a site on this land. Elsewhere on this land, the land is dry. So, as I say, the intermittent stream's been disregarded. If the proper site were described, the full 10 acres, a prior surface water flood assessment would be required according to the dedicated government website. Print off is here, and you can see the 1 in 1,000 risk. You can look at the 1 in 100 and the 1 in 30 as well. The Environment Agency should have been confirmed, should have been consulted and would have confirmed formally, as it confirmed informally to EMSDA, the non-insignificant risk of 20 to 30 centimetres of water gathering around the proposed building and the car park. There's nowhere else to go because this is the lowest point of the land. In addition, the BNG requirements at the moment are being misapplied because it's necessary to draw the red line for BNG purposes around the entire 10-acre site and a separate line along the entire length of the intermittent water course. I'm an environmental lawyer. I know the BNG regime. I'm a bit surprised that this has been neglected. I think turning to the green belt, there seems to be a disregard of obvious significant impacts of the proposed development on the green belt. 2 appeals are cited. The strongest factor in the Scout Hut appeal is its unobtrusive location right next to an existing community college and built development. The strongest factor permitting redevelopment of an existing 28-acre SEND campus was the housing benefit of building up to 325 dwellings on the 51 acres just to the north. These factors don't apply here. If the committee is nevertheless decided to grant permission, may we ask for appropriate conditions, including removal of GPDR to be attached? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plant. I think we will come back and address the red line issue at some point later in our discussions. We now have a Mr. Robert McGinn.
Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rob McGinn. I live adjacent to the site and previously submitted a neutral representation focused solely on the material planning considerations. I recognise the social value of change of scenes work, and I am not opposed in principle to the proposed use. My concern has always been to ensure that any permission granted is tightly defined, enforceable, and proportionate to the sensitivity of this green belt and Surrey Hills National Landscape location. I welcome the officer's careful assessment of the landscape impact, biodiversity, and the conditions. If the Planning Committee is minded to approve the application, I would respectfully ask members to place particular weight on the precision and enforcement of those conditions. In that context, I would specifically support the withdrawal of permitted development rights. Given the site's openness and visibility, removing permitted development rights would provide reassurance that there can be no incremental change in scale, use, or built form beyond what is explicitly approved by this committee. This would help ensure that the development remains strictly limited to the stated use and that the openness and character of the lands are protected over time. And I believe this is supported by the advice in the government planning policy, and it is complementary and consistent to the restrictions imposed on the proximate Pierpoint estate next door. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGinn. We now move to one of the speakers supporting, a lady, Claire Armstrong. You're certainly on the list. You can go in whichever order you prefer.
Thank you. I'm Pam and I'm the Chief Exec of Change of Scene. Change of Scene is a Waverley-based travel charity providing outdoor learning to children and young people aged 7 to 25 from Surrey and Hampshire, and we've been doing that for over 17 years. During term time, we work with 34 children a week who struggle in education. Most are either excluded, have no school place, or find it so difficult to get into the classroom that they rarely attend. Oh, sorry. Many are neurodivergent with diagnoses of autism, ADHD, or both. And by the time they're referred, most are in crisis, accustomed to failure, with rock bottom self-esteem and poor mental health. Some are suicidal. With one-to-one support from a key worker, the children learn animal care, horticulture, cookery, carpentry, beekeeping, and other skills. And through nurture and hard work, Change of Scene strives to build their self-esteem and resilience and help them cope with all of life's challenges. Our aim is for them to be confident enough to return to formal education. Over the years, we've helped 240 young people, and our success rate stands at 78%. We also run an activity programme during school holidays, as well as volunteering placements for local young people working towards bronze, silver and gold Duke of Edinburgh awards. We host volunteering days for local people and businesses. There's always plenty of work to do on site. Change of Scene have to leave our existing site by the end of June 2026. And since 2020, we've been searching for new land. We viewed sites across Surrey, Hampshire and West Sussex, all to no avail. We were on the point of giving up when we were approached by Wishhanger Wellness, a new local charity with a similar ethos to us, using the power of nature to improve mental health and well-being. They offered us a lease for exclusive use of over 8 acres of their land near Frensham, and together we submitted a pre-planning application which got a positive response. Following all the advice we were given, at the end of August we submitted a full planning application, the same one which is in front of you today. This planning application is for all we need to run Change of Scene from the new site, changing the use of an area of the land and putting in place what we need to support the children. That includes an access track, a car park and a building, with a kids area with toilets, with hand washing, with kitchen, housing for the reptiles and an office for staff. We want it to be accessible to children with limited mobility, so for the first time we can take referrals of children who are wheelchair users. The land's perfect, it's quiet, it's secluded, and it's a perfect site for often traumatised young people to begin healing. But the most nature-centric charities need some amenities too. We've worked hard to make the building as unobtrusive and as sustainable as possible, but we can't run the charity without it. So we need the committee's approval to go ahead. If you don't approve, we'll have no option but to close. That means that our vulnerable young attendees will lose their safe space, the chance to build up their fragile self-esteem. Children from local schools will miss out of Duke of Edinburgh placements and companies on the chance to offer volunteering and activities. 15 local staff will lose their jobs, and Surrey will lose an important provision for young people who cannot be educated in mainstream school. Please don't let that happen. And I'm going to pass you over now to Claire, who's going to talk about what Change of Scene means to her and her family. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Over to you, Claire.
Good evening. My name is Claire Armstrong, and I'm here to express my strong support for this planning application. You've already heard from Pam about the general benefits that Change of Scene charity provides, but I want to offer a deeper insight to the vital services they deliver. The support, mentoring, and care provided by the staff to these young children is unique in this area. If this planning application is denied, many families in our community, including mine, will face an unimaginable loss. The impact on current and future families who rely on this incredible support will be devastating. We all know about the ongoing SEND crisis in education and healthcare. Change of Scene is a crucial resource within this catchment area, providing extensive and specialised support we simply cannot afford to lose now or in the future. The demand for the services continues to grow, and the work is both essential and highly effective. I speak with great conviction from personal experience. The work carried out by these dedicated staff members is not just impactful, it's life-changing. For my family, it has been nothing short of life-saving. Thanks to Change of Scene, I'm a proud mother of an amazing 18-year-old son who was once very different. He was removed from school because his needs couldn't be met, and the school felt that he could not keep him and others safe. He was out of education, struggling with severe mental health issues, withdrawn, nearly non-verbal, and very nearly succeeded in taking his own life. As a family, we sought help from everywhere, but only Change of Scene provided real, tangible support. The staff provided my son with a place where he felt wanted, valued, listened to, and understood. Over time, they helped him to rebuild his self-worth and find hope again. Through their specialised care and because of the animals and the peaceful natural environment, he learned that life is precious. He began to believe that there were and are adults outside of his family unit who genuinely cared about him and believed in his potential. Without Change of Scene support, my son would not be alive today. As a family unit, we would have been broken beyond repair. In the beginning, we lived week by week, waiting for the reset, both mental and physical, that Change of Scene gave to John. The support that John received from the staff there gave us all the strength to carry on and gave us hope during those difficult, dark days. The staff worked tirelessly with John. They enabled him to understand his feelings and anxieties. They taught him how to handle grief and loss, and they helped him navigate the complexity of tasks that others navigate with ease, including handling social situations, how to try and recognise and respond to others' emotions, and much, much more. They gave him a safe, confidential space where he could ask for and receive advice without judgment or fear of consequences. Thanks to their unwavering support, my son re-engaged with education, earned qualifications, and is now in the second year of studying animal management at Merriswood College. He has been part of Change of Scene for 5 years and is now volunteering there. I hope you understand that Change of Scene's success comes from the dedicated staff, the animals, the serene countryside setting it provides. They now need a new home to continue their invaluable work so that many more children and families in need can receive the vital support that helped my son and continues to help my son thrive. I entrusted a broken child to Change of Scene, and they gave me back a thriving young man who is eager to give back and help others like him for many years to come. Thank you for listening.
And thank you. Well, as chair of this committee, I have to remain neutral, but I think the members of the committee would thank Claire for having the courage to come forward and address the committee in such a manner. Thank you. We will now move to the ward councillor. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As you said, I'm the ward councillor for Western Villages. I also actually live quite close to the site, which was I live in Frensham, although not close enough to have a personal prejudicial interest or anything like that. I have to say that I've supported Change of Scene's move for a few months now. And to be frank, if I'd realised I was going to be put on the planning committee, I would have probably chosen more measured words. But you know, you can't take them back. I still support them, of course. This application has aroused a considerable amount of interest in the village. And I suppose the two comments I get most, a minority are saying, well, policy is policy. This is highly protected and should remain a greenfield site, and I respect those views. I don't agree with them, but I think that a larger number of people locally are very pro Change of Scene. I've not met a single person who is against Change of Scene at all, but are uneasy that this might be the thin end of the wedge. This has had quite a turbulent planning history with repeated attempts to develop it in some way or the other. And I think there is a legacy of suspicion there. I can't comment on whether that's well-founded or not, but it's undoubtedly there. But I hope members will agree that the conditions that are hedged around this permission means that this is not the thin end of the wedge. This is a standalone planning application, and it is not the forerunner for increased development of any kind at all. So in conclusion, Chairman, I would just like to hope that members will agree. Firstly, I'm sure they do, Change of Scene is an excellent organisation. They will be excellent stewards of this parcel of land, and that they will continue to do some wonderful work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. I think at this point, before we get into the questioning and the debate, if I could ask Russell or Claire just to highlight what conditions are there to reassure Councillor Munro and others of the protection against, if that's the correct word, development within this, future development within this particular site.
Thank you for your question, Chair. So we have condition 2 on the report, which talks about developing in accordance with the approved plans. That has a site location plan which shows the red line. So that is what the application relates to. Any land outside of that, even if it's in the blue line, does not form part of the application in front of you. And then there are obviously plans within that show the proposed development, and it's including the biodiversity net gain, which is proposed to be on site within the red line.
Members, I just want to clarify on the red line. The red line is what the red line is in terms of the application. So that's the area that you're being asked to make a decision on tonight. If land outside the red line is used for purposes other than its lawful use, that would have to be a discussion of, a separate and the subject of a separate application. So just so that members are clear what they're being asked to consider this evening.
Councillor Spence.
Thank you. Could I just ask for some clarity on this issue of permitted development rights? We heard one of the speakers asking if we could consider a condition to remove such permitted development rights. So I'd just like the officer's perspective on that. Thank you.
Okay, in respect of permitted development rights, this is a mixed use. So this is not a use that fits in any one category, and certainly not any of the use classes that are in the general permitted development order. So there was no permitted development rights for this use. And also the site is within the green belt, which already, kind of restricts certain permitted development rights. But I just want to be clear, this building, this site does not benefit from any permitted development rights.
Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I'm just picking up on the first speaker who suggested that there was an indication of, using his words, of intermittent waterways, which would suggest there's a potential of significant flooding around the development area. And I'd like to have the officer's feedback, comments on that, because I get the impression that that didn't seem to have been considered by the officer, but I'm sure he has something to say on that. Thank you.
This is the first I've heard of a waterway on the site, as in within the red line boundary. Given the size of the site at under 1 hectare, there's no requirement to provide a flood risk assessment on this application. I did note the contents of the objection in relation to flooding and drainage. This site is within flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of the flood zones. And officers are satisfied that development would kind of have no impact, no material impact on flooding on the site or elsewhere in regards to fluvial or surface water drainage.
Any other hands? Councillor Munro, would you like to sum up?
I think it's all been said. Thank you very much, Chairman.
In that case, we'll move to the recommendation, which is change of use of land from agriculture to mixed use agriculture and education, and the erection of a building for educational use with solar panels, erection of bin and cycle store, creation of car park and track with associated landscaping with the relocation of existing field shelter. So the officer's recommendation is to approve. Those in favour, please vote now. Thank you, Kim. So that is carried. We now move to item 11 on the agenda, WA 2025/01986, land coordinates. Oh, I wouldn't read that out. Hedgehog Lane, Hazelmere. This is outline application with all matters reserved, except for access for the phased development of the site to provide 14 residential dwellings comprising 8 affordable dwellings with 6 detached custom build homes, together with an internal access road, amenity space and landscaping. This, as I said, is an outline application, and the officer is Russell again. Over to you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair just outlined, this is an outline application for the phased development of the site to provide 14 residential dwellings. 8 of these would be one-bed affordable homes in the form of social rented flats, and the other 6 would be detached self or custom build houses, of which 2 would be 4-bed and the other 4 would be 5-bed. It is proposed that these 6 houses would be offered as discount price affordable surface plots, but custom and self builds are market housing. I just wanted to be clear on that. So it is not a 100% affordable scheme. Appearance, landscaping, layout and scale would all be reserved matters, but access can be considered. As you can see on the plan there, the proposed development will be accessed via 2 points on the established private driveway from Hedgehog Lane, which already serves Longdean House, as well as a pedestrian access you can see on a kind of thin line through the garden of the apartment block to the east. That comes off Hedgehog Lane. So the application site is a triangular shaped open field previously used for grazing, which is undeveloped save for a small detached stable building. The site is on elevated ground with levels markedly sloping towards the north, and less so to the east. It's screened by boundary trees and evergreen shrubs on all sides, including trees to the south along the private driveway, which are the subject of a tree preservation order. The site forms part of a Longdean estate comprising Longdean House just to the southwest, which is a building of local merit, i.e. an undesignated heritage asset. The site is bordered by 135 dwellings on land at Stewart Farm, now Grasslands Close. You can kind of just see them just to the north of the site, just to the south of Sickle Road. And there's a mixture of building styles in this vicinity. The site is outside the Hazelmere settlement boundary. Just moving on to the constraints, the site is mostly within the Surrey Hills National Landscape, but the eastern part is within the area of Great Landscape Value, which is a local landscape designation. The site is also categorised as Grade 4 agricultural land, which is defined as land with significant limitations, restricting it to lower yield crops or permanent pasture. It is also flood zone 1. So I was just going to flick through a few photos of the site. So you've got the view of the entrance off Hedgehog Lane, and then the view from inside the entrance to the site. You've got the stable building on site, which is used as a construction compound in relation to some dwellings that are under construction in and around Longdean House. And then you've got another view from the other end of the access drive close to Longdean House. And you can see the hedging along the site. And then just of the site itself, again, just images of the construction compound and the building materials that are currently stored on site. In terms of wider views, it's pretty limited. The only view of the site itself is really from the north on the public footpath, where you can see some of the boundary trees, but views of the site itself are it's almost invisible, really. The fields themselves, and then I've got some images of the site itself. You can see the land sloping down to the north, and the views from the site access as well in the bottom right hand corner. Just some more views of the site, really, from the westernmost access. Just moving on to this is illustrative layout plan, because as stated, layout and scale and landscaping are reserved matters. So this has been submitted to allow officers to consider whether the proposed number of units could reasonably be accommodated on the site. This indicative layout plan shows the houses and their double garages to be arranged either side of a curved access road with a flatted block containing the one-bed affordable dwellings to the east of the site. The houses would feature front and rear gardens, and the flatted block would also have a communal garden to the rear. Amenity space would be provided for the whole site as well. There are 32 car parking spaces proposed. Just for final point on the phased development of the site, this is a seal phasing plan, just showing you what would effectively, what would be built out first on the site, were the permission to be granted. Exemptions from seal would need to be submitted for the affordable homes and self or custom builds. So just moving to the recommendation, the recommendation's refusal on 2 grounds. The first being that there would be an adverse impact on the site's landscape character and the national landscape, therefore failing to conserve or enhance its landscape and scenic beauty, as well as that of an area of great landscape value. This is not considered to be outweighed by the provision of affordable housing and self or custom build plots, or the biodiversity net gain of above 10%. The presumption in favour of sustainable development, or the tilted balance as it is sometimes called in the NPPF paragraph 11, does not apply with the application of NPPF policies that protect areas or assets of particular importance, provide a strong reason for refusing a development. National landscapes, as is the case here, are listed as comprising a protected area or asset. So I just want to be clear that in most cases, before you tilted balance applies, but in this case, there is no such tilted balance. And there is also a second reason for refusal in respect to the lack of a Section 106 agreement that would secure the affordable housing, which is the 8 flats, the tenure mix type, and also the mix. There will also be consideration to whether the self-build could be secured via Section 106 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. We now move to the public speaking. We have three public speakers. We have also the ward councillor, Peter Nicholson, and we have Councillor Weldon, who I believe is speaking for the town council. Thank you. So the first public speaker is Mr. Guy Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to address your committee this evening. I am Guy Reynolds and I live in Hedgehog Lane, Hazelmere. I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbours who have objected to this proposal to build on a previously undeveloped part of the Surrey Hills National Landscape. We ask you to accept your officer's recommendation to refuse this application for the reasons he has given. The proposal would have a major adverse effect on the landscape character of the site and an adverse effect on national landscape. This would not be outweighed by the provision of affordable or self-build or custom-build housing, which would provide a minor, albeit valuable, contribution to housing supply. WBC would not to meet its statutory duty to further conserve the national landscape and enhance its beauty. Our own case for asking you to refuse this application is as follows. First, we believe the site fully deserves the protection of landscape and scenic beauty that comes from its location in the national landscape in the countryside outside the Greenbelt. The site has high intrinsic value. It is an attractive rural landscape with a rich habitat of ancient grasslands bordered by mature trees and hedges. It provides an attractive setting to Longdean House and sits well in its surroundings, alongside a tree-lined drive, a century-old wood, and a parcel of rural land separating it from public footpath and shielding it from other developments. Second, we note that in determining previous, broadly similar proposals, the planning authorities have concluded they would introduce a form of urban development. This would bring fundamental and harmful change to the character and appearance of the area, and this would outweigh the possible benefits. Development would destroy the original grassland, denude life in the soil beneath it, and provide an ongoing threat to the surrounding trees and hedges. All this while Surrey has one of the lowest density of hedges in the country, and an ongoing climate change is driving the nature loss. And thirdly, more importantly, we believe in the importance of respecting precedent. WBC policy has been consistent in refusing planning permission to develop this site since the first application in 2016. Refusals have been made by councillors and planning officers, and the decisions have been upheld by the planning inspectors, and in one case by the Court of Appeal. Inspectors have assessed broadly similar proposals after thoroughly inspecting the site and its surroundings. They and other public servants, including the Surrey Hills National Landscape Planning Advisor, must collectively have spent many hundreds of hours doing their best to apply planning law to these applications diligently and objectively. We welcome their consistency and defence of the principle of preserving the most protected land first in the public interest. Finally, we note that the Surrey Hills Planning Advisor continues to believe there is a strong case for refusal, and that Ward Councillor Nicholson is speaking in a similar vein. We also appreciate the support of Hazelmere Town Council and has given to protecting the integrity of the national landscape around Hazelmere, especially through the neighbourhood plan. And we point out that significant numbers of affordable homes have been built or approved in this vicinity recently, at Sturt Farm and Redcourt, respectively. In comparison, the present proposal seeks a very, very small provision. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We now move to Mr. Ian Rhodes. Oh, well, I don't know what my wife would say about people swapping at the committee, but of course. And excuse me.
Hi, thank you, Chair and Councillors. I'm Rebecca Pritchard. I'm the Director of Client Services for Transform Housing and Support. We would be the developers and the managers of the supported housing on this site. Transform is a registered provider and a charity. Our purpose is to provide good quality supported housing at social rent for local people in Surrey, and we've been doing that for well over 50 years. Waverley Borough Council's Housing Strategy Enabling Managers have confirmed their support for the supported housing element of this scheme, that Transform Housing and Support are a Waverley Housing Association partner and have been one for many years, and that we have committed to Waverley Borough Council to provide all 8 units proposed at the Longdean site for supported housing to be let at social rents. I think their support is because of the very clear local need for supported housing. Waverley's latest published homelessness statistics between April and June this year show that in just those 3 months, 74 local households faced homelessness and were owed a prevention or relief duty. Of these, 36 households, nearly half, had support needs, with 24 experiencing multiple challenges. Yet only 7 people's homelessness was relieved through supported housing. We actually provide supported housing for Waverley out of borough because you don't have enough locally. Of the 9 households in that same period that were placed in temporary accommodation, 89% were in costly and very unsuitable bed and breakfast or nightly paid accommodation. They were placed outside Waverley, away from their support networks, including GPs and social care and everything else. And they were single people, 89% were single people households, indicating they were likely to be in priority need due to underlying support needs. That means that at the moment, Waverley's most vulnerable residents are having to be housed out of borough in unsuitable, stressful and very expensive temporary accommodation. Our clients, including people who live in Waverley, are aware of this application and are supported of it. And they wanted me to tell you how important the supported housing is that we provide to them. And this is their words. We're all Surrey residents, but we all have unique journeys and experiences. For many of us, these have included challenges with our mental health and physical well-being, surviving abuse and trauma, and the experience of being homeless. Transform supported housing has given us the support and stability we need to rebuild our lives and gain the confidence we need to start to live well and to give back. For some of us, Transform Housing and Support has literally been a lifesaver. We'd like other people to have that benefit. Why Longdean? Well, it's a great location. It's near public transport. It's located close to the town, so people could access education, volunteering, employment, and contribute to their local communities. It's quiet, it's not overlooked, which is great for well-being. But quite simply, we can only provide this supported housing at social rent because of the gift of the freehold land at Longdean. It's a unique opportunity that's been recognised by Hazelmere Town Council, who've supported it twice, and it will be something that will benefit and serve your communities and some of your most vulnerable people, including some of the young people that we heard about using change of scenes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now swap back to Mr. Rhodes.
To thank the officers for bringing this matter to committee and recognising the great body of local support that's brought that about. Our co-applicants Transform have given you an insight into the specialist housing which they provide, the importance of this scheme in enabling them to offer 8 assisted dwellings for social rent on land donated specifically for the purpose. This is a unique opportunity for Transform and for Waverley. This application is significantly different from any which has previously been considered either by committee or at appeal, both in terms of numbers, 14 units, 8 for Transform and 6 self-build plots, and in terms of tenure. The self-build plots are to be offered at a 20% discount to market value in accordance with the NPPF guidance for affordable housing. Thus, in addition to the 57% affordable housing provided by Transform, as stated in the officer's report, already well beyond the policy requirement, we believe that it's possible to argue, and we would strongly argue, that the site is 100% affordable housing to be secured by a legal agreement to be negotiated dependent on your resolution tonight. As 100% affordable housing and 14 units, this is fundamentally different from anything which has been looked at before. And in context, the last time this was considered by committee, Waverley had a housing land supply of over 4 years, as against the figure of, I think it's 1.28 years, which is now widely recognised. A critical shortfall, so every dwelling counts. But these are not typical dwellings. They're 8 purpose-built homes for social rent and 6 self-build plots, both sorely needed. So whilst this is a minor development, the contribution to both Waverley and more specifically Hazelmere is very significant. A couple of policy points that I think we need to discuss. Firstly, no previous application on this site for any development has been considered a major development in policy terms. And whilst the report is unclear on this point, it would be simply incorrect to suggest this application breaches this threshold, which is important because a major scheme requires exceptional circumstances to justify development. This is not the case here. Harm to the ANOB obviously carries great weight. However, as demonstrated in detailed landscape analysis and very well put by the officer, this site is pretty much invisible from the outside. Any harm is limited to the site and is minimised, partly because all trees and hedges are retained. The MPPF advice has currently changed such that the refusal of a development such as this on ANOB grounds would require strong reasons for refusal, which we do not believe is simply not the case. As demonstrated by recent appeal decisions, Red Court, Clockhouse Lane, Bromley, and in pre-app advice given by officers on Dean M Farm, strong is a high bar. It should also be noted that the apartments to be provided by Transform are not actually on the ANOB. So whilst undoubtedly important, landscape grounds simply do not justify a sustainable reason for refusal in the face of the many and weighty social benefits of this scheme. However, being more positive, we invite you to support the scheme on its merits for the good of the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now move to
The Councillor Wheeldon first, if he's worth speaking on behalf of the Town Council.
Oh,
please.
Councillor Weldon, we have been instructed that you have to go first.
Thank you. I should begin by pointing out I am a ward councillor for the area, but I also chair the town planning committee, and I will therefore be speaking from both perspectives. As such, it might be worth pointing out that a lot of what I will be saying is rather ambidextrous on the one hand and on the other hand. So let's begin as ward councillor. I'm well aware that the immediate residents are strongly opposed to this, as is my colleague, Councillor Nicholson, and they have good reasons to oppose this application. We've already heard that it was the subject many years ago of a very important appeals court decision upholding a refusal of an earlier application. That ruling has since been upheld or used in subsequent applications. Applications on this site have repeatedly come before the Town Council, which have been repeatedly refused, and indeed refused here. And the primary reason for that is precisely that it is national landscape land. The residents in their application to the town stated that nothing has changed since that important appeals court decision. So why would I want to argue against that? I obviously I'm not happy, as I said at the Town Council, I'm not happy arguing against the residents. However, it's important to note that in addition to the residents immediately adjacent to the site, there are other residents right across the ward. And as I have spoken to residents across the ward, I'm very conscious that they are strongly concerned about the lack of housing and particularly lack of affordable housing for their young adult offspring. As such, I think this site and this application encapsulate very simply the fundamental problem we have across Waverley, the distinction and opposition between the demand to protect our green spaces and the requirement to provide housing. We've also heard that while there are strong objections from the residents in the ward, I'm conscious that there are residents immediately outside the ward. This site lies on the border of two wards, and immediately opposite, across the border, there's the Sturt Farm development where many of those residents strongly support this application. So what has in fact changed since the appeals court ruling? I think quite a lot. First of all, the national environment has changed. There was reference to the Red Court ruling, which was quoted as an example of where there is now affordable housing. That is precisely because of an appeals court decision supporting the appeal. There was a reference to precedent. There's precedent on this site, but there is also precedent across the town as a whole. The Supreme Court has approved it. I don't believe that any refusal of this application can be upheld. My last observation is a very simple one. It has been pointed out that the site is national landscape, but it is not visible from the road. I do not see the point of protecting national landscape, which nobody can actually see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weldon. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a ward member, I speak in favour of the officer's decision to refuse. This application is simply a minor revision of many applications for the site put forward over a number of years. They've also been refused by planning officers and then refused on appeal by the planning inspectors for clear reasons. The land is highly valued landscape in an attractive hill setting in the southern slopes of Hazelmere. That's been seen. And it would be a significant loss. Development would bring light spill, and what is particularly important is it would not meet the clear, detailed guidelines for development in the wooded Greensand Hills. And the main support, has to be said, for the scheme is in a very local area. Now, I'm a keen supporter of social housing for rent. I mean, it's very extremely important. But the key is where it's built. And a recent good example is the 4 Chiddingfold schemes where quality housing for council house rent is being and has been completed on the unused land adjacent to and has full village support. And we know that other schemes, Waverley schemes in the pipeline for our villages, Churt is one, Elstead another. This is a council priority. And things are moving on this. We're not slack on pushing for social housing. So there's also been a couple of large schemes of affordable rent in the town. One's at Way Hill, flats at Way Hill, and also the nearby grasslands. Now, these have both been made by housing associations, and they are charging affordable rents, which is excellent. And there will, of course, be more social housing, sadly, when Scotland Park 2 is built. So I would like to further say that the planning office, I think, has written a very thorough paper on this. It's excellent. And the National Landscape Officer report is very thorough indeed. And refusal is, in my view, the correct answer. And why cause permanent damage for very little gain?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. We'll now open it up for either questions or comments. Councillor Spence.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. We've heard, I think, from one of the presenters in favour of this, that it could be argued that this is 100% affordable. I see it's part of the affordable housing exception scheme, but then there's an affordable or social housing element and a self-build housing element. Could you just clarify, are we talking 100% affordable housing, or are these two distinct types of housing? Thank you.
So just to be clear, the 8 flats are proposed as affordable housing. I think I said it was affordable social rent, excuse me. As for the self-build plots, the description in the NPPF doesn't allow them to be affordable housing. There is no mechanism by which officers could secure them to be 20% off the market price. So those have not been considered to be affordable housing, just to be clear.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a similar question to Councillor Spence. If the application was for 13 affordable housing or social rented affordable housing, would it be approved?
We're considering the application in front of us, Councillor, so I can't comment on that.
Okay.
Councillor White.
Yes, just a point of interest. The planning application is for access. Am I correct, or is it for the full scheme? Sorry, I might be getting conflicted on.
So it's for outline application with access, so we can consider matters of access.
Thank you. And what is interesting is the self-builds. So with outline planning, are the areas of the properties, are they all defined at that stage? And being self-builds, they're all defined as well at that stage.
So the plots themselves, we've got an indicative layout plan in front of us. So all we're really doing is saying, we think that you could have 6 self-build properties on this site. We're not securing the exact amount of space to each plot. So they can then change that word permission to be granted. So those plot sizes, just to be clear, can be changed at reserve matters stage, where you would consider the layout of the site.
Thank you.
I think what Councillor White was trying to determine was, once you get to reserve matters, would the number of self-builds be as described in this report?
Okay, apologies for misunderstanding the question. So the description of development is for 6 self-build homes. So those would be fixed by the description of development of this application.
Can we just add that self-build have their own sort of description? So we would need to then look at how we ensure they're self-build, because they need to meet certain criteria, including that they're then designed by the owners, and hence our concern that you can't have a self-build as an affordable, because it's something that someone then builds out themselves. And by definition, affordable is to meet a housing need for rent or shared ownership.
Can I just see the hands once more? Councillor Steiger.
Yeah, just quick question. Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question for the Surrey Hills AONB objection. Could you just sort of summarise the objection? I've not seen it sort of exactly. And secondly, the Surrey Wildlife Trusts, are they objecting, or they're not objecting as long as the BNG study is within 10%, or what? If you could just address those 2 points, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So I don't have the Surrey Hills National Landscape objection in front of me, but it was quite lengthy in which he considered the weight to be given to the affordable housing and then the self-build, which he also identified as not affordable housing. And obviously the impact on the national landscape, as per my report, it's you having to demonstrate kind of overriding public benefits to develop in the natural landscape, and as well as conserving and enhancing its scenic beauty. Effectively, he didn't consider that the scheme achieved that aim, so therefore objected. I appreciate in my report it just says objection, but where you want to read his objection for, it's available on the planning register. But that's just a brief summary. He laid out the scheme in front of him and the benefits, but also the harm, and considered it wasn't outweighed. In regards to the consultation response by the Surrey Wildlife Trust, they had no remaining concerns beyond the biodiversity net gain assessment. At this stage, today, we hadn't had information through about the site degradation. That is a response to the temporary use of the site as a construction compound and for building materials scattered across the site in relation to Longdean House and the dwellings being constructed or have been constructed in and around that setting. So I mean, at the moment, it's I suppose it's a recommendation that those measures were addressed, but we didn't quite get there prior to committee. So their position is that the application can't recommend approval, but they recommended conditions in respect of all other matters or whatever species and flora, because that was a reason for refusal it would have been a refusal of the last application, which was withdrawn, but they were happy subject to the biodiversity net gain assessment taking into account that site degradation, but that information wasn't submitted prior to today's meeting.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thanks, Jim. I've got two further questions, actually. Did I understand correctly that the land has been donated to the charities free of charge? Could you just confirm that, please? Then I've got a second question.
So that is what the speaker disclosed. It isn't a material planning consideration.
No, but just as a piece of information.
Well, that's what one of the speakers.
One of the speakers said that. Okay. My second question is, I'd like clarification on top of page 189, our own housing strategy comment. It says it's supportive of affordable housing, but the custom self-built houses are not affordable and fail to meet a local need. Why do they fail to meet a local need? That in every other planning application, we're told that any housing meets a local need and contributes to our overall housing supply. So why did that particular housing not meet a local need? I don't understand what that comment means.
The comment means it's not meeting the local need for affordable housing because it isn't affordable housing.
But it still says it fails to meet a local need.
I know but I think that's what the officer meant.
That's what's implying.
Yeah.
It fails to meet an affordable housing need.
Absolutely.
It will still meet a local need.
Yep, they're commenting through the lens of affordable housing.
Okay. But it's very ambiguous, actually, to say the least. Thank you.
Thank you. Do either of the ward or town councillors wish... Oh, sorry, Councillor Monroe.
Could I start the debate? Can we move to the debate? Thank you. I think this is a closely balanced issue. On the one hand, you've got a local landscape, which is worth preserving. Who could argue with that? And on the other, there is a need for this sort of development. It's a perfect development where it's somewhere else. I'm inclined to vote for the development, i.e. against the officer's recommendation. And I think for the most important reason, first of all, I take great weight with what the town council says. It's a very active town council. It cares passionately about Hazelmere, etc., and they have made no objection. And Councillor Weldon can confirm that, and that carries weight with me. Secondly, the Natural England haven't objected either, which is slightly surprising. That's what it says on the report. Thirdly, again, Councillor Weldon mentioned this, and it's in the report. It's not actually overlooked by other properties, and I presume that's an accurate statement, but it was in the report. So although I can't deny that it'd be better were it not built, was it, as I say, it's worthy of preserving, I don't see a development here as blighting the wider landscape. Although, of course, I understand nearby residents' objections. So taking one thing with another, I'm going to vote for the development.
Could you turn your mic? Thank you very much. Who was first? Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was swayed by Councillor Weldon. I think he made a lot of very strong points. The fact that we are in a national landscape land, the fact that it's not visible from anybody from the road, I think actually means that it is an opportunity for development. My general gut feel is we should always be supporting any indications of social housing, whether it's a small percentage or a large percentage, whether you exclude self-build or not. And therefore, I will be supporting that it should be granted, which means I will recommend against the officer. Thank you.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I very rarely vote against the officer's recommendations, although I may be doing so twice this evening. But I agree with Councillor Monroe and with Councillor Lawton. Councillor Terry Weldon certainly spoke very convincingly, not to say that his colleague also didn't speak convincingly. So as Councillor Monroe says, it's pretty well a balanced decision in many ways. But I would certainly come down on the side of the applicant who is seeking approval for this, and I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Councillor Steiger.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm quite conflicted, really. I obviously support affordable housing, especially at social rents. I think there's a real need, and the charity really set out a very positive case for voting for it. I am very worried about the planning officer from the area of outstanding national beauty objecting to it, and also our officers. I give that a lot of weight. So I'm conflicted, and I'll have to come to a decision. Thank you.
Councillor Rivers.
I was just going to make one tiny point that when a tree falls in a forest, it falls whether or not people see it. It falls. So whether or not people see this land, it still is worth protecting.
Councillor White.
Sorry, I just need confirmation of procedure. Is there an opportunity here for, I guess we've got to go to the vote anyway, and it depends on the outcome of the vote, but is there an alternative that could be discussed in debate of all properties being classified as affordable? In other words, no self-build on the site. I mean, my position is that I feel a lot more swayed if I knew that it was all confirmed as affordable housing. But I don't think we can do that, can we? I don't know.
Just to confirm through you, Chair, no, the application you have before you is the application before you. So members, you can't make up your minds that you're going to choose to make it affordable housing when it clearly isn't. And members, obviously, you know, the local plan is seeking to deliver affordable housing, but we're balancing the need to deliver affordable housing against other planning objectives and other planning harms. So it is that planning balance. There are a couple of more points I just want to confirm on, but are you happy? So members, I think you do need to be mindful of the fact this is national landscape. You cannot just wipe that away by saying, well, we can't see it, so it's fine. But more significantly, you do also need to be mindful of the Lura test that's been referred to this evening and the importance of that and the duty on you as effectively the local planning authority. And just to remind you of that, which is, you know, a test within the Levelling Up and Regen Act. So you must seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the area of our outstanding natural beauty. So in your consideration this evening, you will need to demonstrate how granting planning permission achieves that to make your decision a proper, robust decision. So members, you might want to feed that into your debate.
Thank you, Claire. I think what the head of planning is saying, that if members are minded to go against the officer, they will have to come up with an alternative motion which is sustainable. Councillor Spence, Councillor Gale, Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm like Councillor Steiger, feel rather conflicted on this. And I'm hearing that the natural landscape and the one thing that would sway me for supporting this would be demonstrating the exceptional circumstances. I think, I'm not sure whether that's the technical phrase, but that would overcome the harm to the natural landscape. Social housing to me is one such exceptional circumstance, and I think it's very compelling that there is social housing. However, not all this site is social housing. And therefore, if it was all social housing, I don't think I'd have any issue with my decision. But I'm torn at the moment because I'm seeing 2/3 of it is not social housing. However, it may have been described or portrayed as social housing. It isn't. And yet that seems to be the most compelling reason for rejecting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a question? If we were to accept this tonight, would that land then be able to be used in other ways? Could it lose the affordable dwellings on it if it came back for another option?
So the permission that you'd be granting would be as per the description of development. So you'd need to delegate to secure a legal agreement to secure 8 affordable houses as part of the scheme.
Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just put the plan back on the screen and confirm which properties are self-build and which are social housing, so we can understand? But yeah, well, not social. What you're calling affordable housing. Is it the bit on the top right, which is the
Yes, it's a
affordable housing?
larger block there. That's the 8 affordable housing, and then the detached properties are the self or custom build.
So actually, in terms of percentage of land, it's probably less than 20%. I wouldn't even say that.
It's probably about, yeah, probably 25%, I would say. But also, you know, members do be aware of that layout, because we've been asked the question about properties, plot sizes. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 substantial plots, substantial footprints, and substantial double garages and driveways. So you need to weigh in the balance that it's 8 affordable houses, and the remaining are large detached properties on large plots, and be mindful of that in your planning, the planning balance you are making this evening.
And thank you for that clarification, because that personally does maybe change my judgment, because actually it's not a significant part of the land which is affordable. Thank you.
I'll return to either Councillor Nicholson or Councillor Weldon. Can one of you agree to sum up? Or you could share it, because I think you're.
I think sharing might be the fair way of going on. Do you think?
Yeah, share it, because you are opposing each other.
Right. Well, I've 4 points to make, and the first one from this discussion, there's a clear conflict between national landscape, AGLV land, and a small amount of social housing. That's fairly clear. I think the officer made an excellent point. There is an adverse impact on landscape, and crucially, the tilted balance does not apply. But finally, what sort of precedent would this acceptance bring?
Thank you. Perhaps I didn't make the town position entirely clear earlier. I said that on previous applications, the town has consistently voted against. This time we voted quite narrowly, admittedly, but we voted in support of the application. Why? What's the big difference? One of them is that this is not just affordable housing, but specifically social rent. But the other consideration, which I think is really important tonight, is a simple fact. In Haslemere, there is no land available which is not protected as either national landscape or greenbelt. If we are not to build on national landscape land, where are we to provide housing? The recent issues and options consultation on the local plan had a very useful map right in the beginning. That map shows that almost the only land across all of Waverley which is not protected is either on the outskirts of Farnham or it's in the east of the borough. If we are not to build on Haslemere National Landscape, do you want it on the outskirts of Farnham or in the east of the borough? The alternative, in my view, is precisely accept that sometimes we need to build on national landscape. We've already seen the appeals decision on Red Court and elsewhere that yes, we can build on national landscape. I believe in this instance, we have no choice. We must build on this particular site. Thank you.
Thank you both. We'll now move to the recommendation. And the recommendation, excuse me, I won't read the whole recommendation out. I have done so earlier, but the recommendation from the officer is for refusal. So when you vote, refusal will be the green button, and counter to that, to approve the application, will be the red button.
Can I do it verbally? I left my card behind.
Yeah.
I vote to.
Are you accepting the officer's recommendation to refuse?
I'm voting against the officer's recommendation.
So you're voting in support of the application or the applicant?
I'm voting in support of housing.
Right.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. So that is 8 in favour of the officer's recommendation,
no abstentions and 2 against the officer's recommendation. So therefore, the application is refused.
Yeah, so that one is carried. We have 4 applications remaining. We have 2 tree applications and then a further 2 applications which are in front of us because they involve a member of staff. I would remind members that when we reach 10 o'clock.
Councillor Wheeldon, Councillor Wheeldon.
Well, I don't know. I suppose a physical fight in front of the planning committee might be some form of entertainment, but not this evening. So let me say it again. We are approaching 10 o'clock. At that point, we have to vote as whether to continue or not. The 2 tree applications, the 2 tree officers have been very patient, waiting for their turn. And Wanda, who's looking after the 2 applications, which are because the agent is an employee, has also been patiently waiting. So I'll leave that with you for the moment, but I think we can probably squeeze one more application in before we vote to continue or not. So I will invite your name. Oh gosh. I'll invite the tree officer.
Any tree officer.
Any tree officer will do. I am standing aside on this one because it's in my ward and Penny.
Okay, in the just to keep things very, very brief, I'm not going to introduce it at all. It'll be over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The next item for you to consider tonight is TPO 0725, trees on land south of 70 Recklesham Hill, Farnham. So the purpose of this item for tonight is to consider the objection to the making of the TPO and to determine whether the order should be confirmed. The order relates to 4 individual trees and 5 groups of trees of public visual amenity. So here's the site plan. So you can see the trees sort of predominantly on the north and western boundary with a group on the south and an extra tree at the bottom there. There's an aerial plan from 2021, which will sort of demonstrate the layout. Also, a relevant point is to the north, there is a TPO 5299, which is an area order and a woodland order, and you can just see at the top of the screen there, which is W1. A bit of background to the making of the order. So 0725 was made on 25th of June 2025. It affords the protection of 4 individual trees and 5 groups of trees on land south of 70 Recklesham Hill. The order was made in response to identify potential harm to trees of good public visual amenity due to development desire of the land. The site is subject to planning application WA 2023-02741, which seeks to erect 26 dwellings, formation of vehicular access, as well as open space landscaping and associated infrastructure. The development application was refused with reason for refusal number 9, identifying that insufficient information was submitted to the LPA to demonstrate that the proposal would not result in harm to trees on the site and therefore does not comply with Policy NE2 of Local Plan Part 1 2018, Policy DM11 of LPP Part 2, FMP 13 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan 2020 and then PPF. For the making of the order, there was 1 letter of support received and 1 objection to the making of the order, which is why we're here tonight. An appeal was made to the Secretary of State against Waverley Borough Council following the refusal of the planning application for the site. The appeal progressed as a hearing, which was heard in July of this year, and the decision heard in August this year allowed the appeal and planning permission was granted. As a result of the planning permission being granted, the tree works on the appeal site, there are tree works required to facilitate the development. This includes the removal of some trees subject to the order, and the authority's consent is not required to undertake those works in order to implement full planning permission. However, the trees to be removed will remain subject to statutory protection should the order be confirmed, but can be removed in order to implement the full planning permission. Should the development be implemented, the contribution of the retained trees is likely to become even more apparent in a domestic setting, where they will provide mature landscape features and further reinforce the area's character. Their protection is therefore not just justified now, but also essential to securing the long-term success of the development and its integration in the wider landscape. So this is G5 and T4 as viewed from Recklesham Hill. The access to the site is in that gap there between the yew tree on the edge of G5 and T4. To be clear, T4 will be removed to facilitate the development. This is a view of G4 looking from internal site to the west. This group is proposed to be removed as part of the application. This is G3 looking again from the internal site looking west. I think 2 of the 5 trees here are proposed to be retained. 3 of the 5 proposed to be retained, 2 to be removed. This is T1, which is proposed to be retained, and in the background you can see a combination of G1 and also aforementioned TPO 5299. This is G2, and the most important sort of feature of that group is the oak tree in the centre of your image, which is category 8 oak tree, as well as the Western Red Cedars to the right of that. All of that is proposed to be retained as part of the development. And this is Recklesham Hill again, so just the other way around, looking at this, predominantly is to be retained, with some of the trees to the left of the image to be removed as part of G4. And this gives you an idea of the layout of the site and the retained trees. So you can see the retained trees essentially as part of the TPO and the development. This is a very complicated tree protection plan. The red dashed areas show the trees to be removed. So you can see in this corner, this is to be removed in its entirety. And then across the rest of the groups, which are subject to the order, a number of trees are to be removed as well, but also a substantial number to be retained as part of that sort of mature landscaping and arboricultural quality. This is the list of tree surgery works to be undertaken. To be clear, not all of these trees are subject to the order, but some of them certainly are. To summarise the objection made by the landowner, it was made on sort of 2 points. The council has not provided a clear assessment of the amenity value of the trees included within the order, and that the proposed development includes replacement planting which the objector considers sufficient to maintain the character of the area without a need for an order. The officer's response to that objection, to break it down to 2 points again, the amenity assessment, the LPA is not required by law to use a specific tool or methodology to assess amenity when considering the making of a TPO. In accordance with section 198 of the Town Council Planning Act 1990, a TPO may be made where it appears expedient in the interest of amenity to protect trees or woodlands within the LPA's area. The key legal tests are the trees provide amenity value and it is expedient to protect them. In regards to the replacement tree planting mitigating the loss of trees, the council does recognise the replacement planting scheme as mitigation for the loss of 23 trees in 8 groups. However, the existence of a planting scheme itself does not remove the need to protect trees, retain trees via a TPO. The new planting scheme will take time to establish. The existing trees provide immediate and established amenity value, which complement the planting scheme as it establishes and becomes independent in the landscape. The objection was maintained. So your planning consideration in regards to the order, it's about amenity value and expediency. So the trees subject to 0725 are visible from Recklesham Hill. They contribute positively to the public visual amenity of the area and reinforce the semi-wooded character of this location between the settlements of Recklesham, Rowledge and the wider Alice Holt Forest landscape. The trees individually and collectively make a significant and a positive contribution to the character and setting of the site and its surroundings. The expediency is the removal or excessive pruning of these trees would have a significant negative impact on the amenity of the area. There is a demonstrated development desire for the land. It's therefore expedient in the interest of public amenity to place a provisional TPO on the individual trees and groups. So in conclusion, the council has carefully considered the threat posed by development and the quality of trees on the site and their amenity value. It's concluded that the objections raised against the confirmation of 0725 are not substantiated and do not override the public visual amenity provided by the trees and the realistic threats to their longer term retention. Whilst the removal of some trees will be required to facilitate the allowed development of the site, the confirmation of the order will allow for appropriate tree controls for retained trees in order to protect the sylvan nature of the locality and protect the amenity value that these trees provide. And the recommendation is that the tree preservation order be confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that that was a very full and clear presentation. Councillor Clark, do you have anything to say? No, I don't think so. Are there any questions or anything to debate, or shall we move to the recommendation? Are you happy to move to the recommendation? So we've had the recommendation read to us. When lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That's 9 in favour of the recommendation and 1 abstention.
So that is carried. Councillor Clark.
We now have to take according to the Constitution, we have to take a vote as to whether to continue. I think the tree officer gave us a good example of how things can move into second gear. So those in favour of, I would estimate, another 25 minutes.
Just a reminder, you have to come back on Christmas Eve if you say yes, you're going home.
Yeah, those in favour of finishing this evening, show of hands. Well, that's yet another unanimous decision.
Not unanimous.
I have been a thorn in your side this evening, Councillor Munro. I do apologise for the third time.
I'll get my own back.
Thank you, Chair. So this item agenda relates to the Tree Preservation Order 1025, trees on land south of Ruffold Farm, Guildford Road, Cranley. So this is to consider the objection to making of a Tree Preservation Order 1025 and determine whether or not the order should be confirmed. The order relates to 5 groups of trees, 33 individual trees and 2 woodlands. This is a site plan which is associated with the TPO, where you can see the individual trees, groups and woodlands contained within the site, and to the northwest is Ruffold Farm. This is an aerial view where you can see the tree canopies, the woodlands. It's a woodland pasture. I want to make note of to the east of the image, there are some very bright green dots. They are an existing TPO and are not the subject to TPO 1025. These are some site images from across the site from various points. Just to give an example of the stock that is there. There are some relatively younger trees and some much older veteran trees contained within the order. The TPO was made on the 17th of July in 2025, and it was made in response to identified potential harm to trees of good public visual amenity due to proposed development of the land. The site is subject of a planning application, WA 2025-00805, which is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access and layout for the erection of up to 70 residential units. This has now been amended to 63. 1 objection was received to the making of the order. So for the planning consideration, the amenity value, it has expansive views of the site, are visible from a public right-of-way, footpath 355, which links Cranley Common to the Downslink Bridleway. And the expediency is that the site is subject to a live planning application. So just to summarise the objection that's been received, it's quite an extensive objection, and you'll see within the appendices there's been some to and fro between the council and the objector, and so I'll just sort of summarise the points that have been made. The first is that there were inaccurate drawings showing the location of trees accompanying the tree preservation order. Trees included that were well outside the red line site plan and should not be included. And just so you know, the red site plan is for the current planning application. And that the order was excessive, including trees and groups and wooded that should not be included. So in response to that, the 3 points were that the council has attended site to plot the trees. We've used aerial imagery, and we've referenced the detail from the arboricultural information to assist in plotting the trees with a high degree of accuracy. Whilst there are trees outside of the site boundary included within TPO, the RPAs, which means root protection areas, and or crown spreads of these trees cross the red boundary line. Therefore, there is a potential impact to trees from development works. Officers remain of the view that the trees covered by this order have sufficient public visual amenity to warrant protection. In conclusion, the objection raised against TPO 1025 is not substantiated and does not override the public amenity value presented by the trees and the realistic threats to the longer term retention if the order is not confirmed. Therefore, the recommendation is that TPO be confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we debate or do we go to the vote? Right, we're going to go to the vote. I've been told by my vice chair.
Recommend.
Those in favour of the recommendation, please vote now.
Thank you, Chair. That's 10 in favour of the recommendation and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to both tree officers. They are the superheroes of the planning department.
I'd love trees, I really do. Coming from South Africa, they're very scarce. But in this part of the world, they grow without help.
We will shortly be moving to the final 2 applications, both with Wanda Jarnecki, and they are in front of us because the agent is a council employee. So over to you, Wanda.
So thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'll try to make this clear and efficient. So the first application site is called Amberley. It's off the south of the Midhurst Road, and the proposal is for an extension to an ancillary outbuilding. So the site is shown in the context of the wider area. There's a little outlined block just on the southern side of the A286, which is the Midhurst Road. Within the application site, which is accessed from the northern road, there's an access private road coming off the Midhurst Road to reach the application site. Within the application site, there is a single-storey detached outbuilding and a bungalow with a lower ground floor garage. And what you can't see particularly well from here is the extensive vegetation on the site boundaries, which you can probably see a little bit more of in the next slide. So the photograph on the left is an aerial view of the site of the application site, and within the site you can see an area of cleared ground which represents the area where the proposed extension to the outbuilding will be. On the right-hand side, you can see the vegetation on the site boundaries is quite extensive. What you can't see there though is that the application site is down a hill behind the dwellings that front onto the Midhurst Road, and the site slopes slightly back uphill to the rear of the site. So the southern part of the site is at a higher level, which is why there's been some clearance of the ground in order to facilitate the building of the extension. Now the next slide shows the block plan. So on the left you've got the existing, and on the right you have the proposed. You can see that the extension projecting out to the northeast of the existing outbuilding. These photographs, top right shows the access to the immediate site. It's at the bottom of the road that comes off the Midhurst Road. There's again two tracks leading to the house behind Amberley and Amberley itself. Within the site, you can see on the slide on the bottom left, there is the slope uphill towards the existing outbuilding, behind which there's an extensively screened boundary. And the top right photograph shows the area of land that's been cleared in the retaining wall, which is part of the landscaping works necessary to facilitate this. And the slide on the bottom shows the front of the dwelling, and there are very limited views of the front of the existing outbuilding behind all of the rather charming tropical vegetation. Then what we're looking at here is, again, the elevation onto which the extension will project. We can see on the top right-hand side views towards the site's eastern boundary where it's extensively screened, and the last photograph shows you the rear elevation of the existing outbuilding. Here are the plans. There is the existing floor plan on the left-hand side. It's currently an ancillary outbuilding. It was previously a garage, but it became converted into a games room. And then a proposed floor plan where you will see that an extensive enlargement has been made to the area of amenity space. The proposed elevations are shown here with the existing elevations of the outbuilding and the proposed elevations of the outbuilding. All the fenestration is at ground floor level. It will occasion no harm to overlooking, in the officer's opinion, as a result of the boundary screening and the scale of the proposal. And that's the end of that. So let me just point out that there have been no objections from neighbours, that there are no concerns in the officer's mind regarding visual amenity or residential amenity, and there are no other concerns. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Wanda. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Spence.
Quick question here. This application, and indeed I think the next one, is because the agent is an employee of Waverley Borough Council.
Yes.
Now, I can understand where if it's an employee of the council, but an agent and an employee, do they have multiple hats? Could you please clarify? Thank you.
So they are employed by the council, but they do also act as an agent. That sometimes is the case in local government. I'm not actually certain who the officer is, but that is the case, which is why
They're operating privately.
Yeah, they're operating privately outside office time. From members' point of view, that's not relevant to your decision this evening. That's merely the reason why it's before you this evening at 10:15.
Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. Once again, I am both the ward councillor but also the chair of the planning committee. However, I will be brief. As a ward councillor, I have no objection whatsoever. I know the site well. As part of my part-time day job, I deliver medicines. There are 3 houses in this little enclave off the road. I deliver medicines to 2 of them, so I really do know the site very, very well. I have no objections at all. As a town councillor, I do not have authority to speak on their behalf for the very simple reason that when the application came before the town council, we saw no objection. We didn't find it necessary to delegate anybody to speak. So that speaks for itself. Thank you.
In that case, we can move to the vote. The recommendation is to approve the erection of an extension to an ancillary outbuilding as amplified by the plans received. Those in favour, please show on the console.
That's unanimous, Chair. In favour of the application.
That one is carried. So back to you, Wanda, for our final application this evening.
Excuse me. This application site is the dwelling on it is called Rundell. It's a development in a development area of Farnham. I'll proceed to showing you in a minute where it is. But what is proposed is the erection of single-storey extensions and alterations. The extensions would be to the rear, and they would comprise also a tiny first floor dormer window, which will be shown on elevation plans later in the presentation. So in the wider context, it's in Boundstone, which is the Wrecklesham, that's part of the southern part of Farnham. On the left-hand side, you can see Applelands Close to the east of the development. The application site was formerly the garden of number 11 Boundstone Road, which is currently now the applicant's northern neighbour. The next nearest neighbour to the application site is number 4 Applelands Close, known as Pantiles to their occupiers. There is also a dwelling number 15 on Applelands Close, which is adjacent to the site's rear boundary. In the context of the aerial photography, you've got the access shown in got a blue overlay showing you where the access is, and the application dwelling is just under the little I. Of relevance to this application is that there are 2 protected trees adjacent to the site's southern boundary, and there's also a protected, I think 2 protected trees or a group of protected trees and a single protected tree on the access, but within the land owned by number 11 Boundstone to the north of the application site. So the existing and proposed roof plan here on the block plan shows you the extension would increase the length of the rear gable and provide 2 flat roofed rear elements, and there would be an additional 1 roof light, which I don't know why, but they're not on this block plan, and there would be there's an additional dormer window, tiny little dormer window on the north elevation. So here are my site photographs. The top left shows you the degree to which Rivendell is set back from Applelands Close. On the top right, you see the front elevation of the existing front elevation. There's a top floor on the left-hand side. There's a top floor round window. It's proposed to replace that with a rectangular window, which would be slightly larger. And that's of relevance to this application because when the original permission for the bungalow was given, there was no first floor accommodation, and that was just to light the loft space. There's been since the application for the original permission was given that the occupiers have now converted the loft space, so that is now a habitable room, and there is a slight degree of overlooking, therefore, from that window into the rear amenity space of the neighbour to the north. And it is just below the threshold. The existing level of overlooking is just on the threshold from which we would consider there would be harm. There are dormer windows shown in the bottom left. They also serve that bedroom. They look out to the side, and there's sufficient distance there that those dormers occasion no harm. On the bottom right photograph is a door on the west elevation, which would be replaced by a window. Immediately adjacent it is fencing and screening, which would prevent any harm from that particular element of the proposal. Now we come on to the rear elevations. There would be a projection beyond the rear elevation of this gable on either side, and that gable would come front forward to about the level of where the steps are now. On the bottom, you can see the extent to which the garden can accommodate that size of development because it's a very long garden. And on the right-hand side at the bottom, you can see one of the 2 protected trees on the site boundary. Just behind, I think, exactly that black box is the proposed site of a new roof light, which is adjacent to an existing roof light, which you will then see on the plans. Here's the floor plan of the proposed versus the existing. As you see, they're quite elongated extensions at the back, but there's also a proposed small extension to the front, which would change a currently covered over area, but is open area of the front porch into a more enclosed area and give rise to a slightly larger entrance hall. The rather triangulated little box above the area of the proposed new front extension shows the position of the proposed new dormer, which would serve to light that entrance hall. The first floor plans are also included here. On the left-hand side, you see the existing first floor plan, and on the right-hand side, you see the proposed. The only differences being the inclusion of a small roof light over the stairwell and the inclusion of the dormer window, which is stated on the plan to light the entrance hall. The elevations here show the changes to the fenestration on the front elevation, the round window becoming a rectangular window, the dormer being on the first floor installed, and then on the bottom, on the ground floor, small changes to the fenestration to reflect the new arrangement of the porch. The rear fenestration, obviously, as a result of the two rear extensions and the rear gable extension, is different on the ground floor, and the additional roof light is shown on the south elevation plan, on the south elevation. And here are the side elevations. We have one additional roof light, which would be adjacent to the border with pantiles. That's number 4, Applelands Close, and the 2 windows on the west elevation, which would look straight into fencing and screening. The last slide shows the tree protection plan, which was submitted in support of the application. The top right photograph shows the 2 trees subject of the tree protections order on the south boundary. There are, on the right-hand side, the clusters of trees on adjacent to drive shown, and the tree protection plan addresses this by installing protection fencing where the tree officer has perceived a potential harm to trees may arise. So to summarise, the officer's conclusion is that having received no objections or any other representations, and contrary to or raising objections, and the only consultation response having been received from the tree officer, who had no objections subject to the imposition of his recommended conditions, we are recommending this to you for approval, as there are no concerns regarding the visual and residential amenity or trees which can't be addressed by a condition. And the conditions suggested are in regard of the new proposed fenestration on the front elevation at first floor and of the proposed roof light, to obscure glaze these elements of the proposal in order to prevent harm to neighbouring residential amenities from overlooking. That would be I'm terminating that now and leaving it to you all for questions.
Thank you, Wanda. Councillor Clark, do you have anything to say? No? Are there any questions for Wanda or issues? Nothing to debate. So shall we move to the recommendation? When lights show, please vote.
Thank you. That's unanimous in favour of the recommendation.
That is carried. So Councillor Clark, I'll leave you to finish.
I will now say that the most popular words of this evening. Thank everybody for their patience, especially the officers who may have a journey ahead of them, and look forward to seeing you at the January Planning Committee.